Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the ISO, we'd like to welcome you to today's Extended Day Ahead Market Q&A workshop. My name is Christina Guimera, representing ISO Affairs. I'm joined at CAISO headquarters by Joanne Serena, Khaled Abdul Rahman, George Angelidis, Mark Richardson, and Milos Bosanak, and as well as James Lynn online. Just a few reminders before we get started today. Today's call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. This meeting is intended to stimulate open dialogue and engage different perspectives. Please remember to keep your comments professional and respectful today. Also, please try to keep your comments and questions succinct so that we're able to hear from everyone. We welcome and look forward to your engagement and participation in today's meeting. For raising your hand during the meeting, the raise hand icon is directly at the bottom of your screen. If you joined audio only, please press *3 on your device. There's also an Inteller transparency viewer at the bottom right to see other attendees on the call. Please be sure to refresh prior to viewing. And closed captioning is also available by clicking the CC button at the bottom left of your screen. Please remember to state your name and affiliation first before making a comment. You may also send questions and comments via chat to all panelists, and if you need any technical assistance during the meeting today, please send a chat to the event producer, Inteller Events. Just a reminder that CAISO introduced implementation workshops to walk stakeholders through the mechanics of significant changes in market functionality. All changes presented are consistent with the established tariff. They may, however, precede the publication of related BPMs, as the intent of these workshops is to give stakeholders as much advanced knowledge as possible. Questions are welcome during and after the workshop. I also have some slides to share on CAISO antitrust guidelines. Just to summarize it, it is the policy of CAISO to comply with antitrust laws. Discussions shall remain focused on CAISO-administered markets, systems, rules, and planning and related advocacy. And please avoid discussion of topics, whether informally or formally, that would result in anti-competitive behavior. CAISO may intervene and follow up on any conduct that appears to present legal or compliance concerns. Today we will begin with some opening remarks from Khaled Abdul Rahman and Joanne Serena. Then Milos Bosanak will take us through stakeholder concerns and feedback. Then George Angelidis and James Lynn will review a proposed transitional design before we wrap up for the day. So with that, I'll turn it over to Khaled Abdul Rahman, a VP and Chief Information and Technology Officer at the ISO, to get us started.
Yes, hello everyone. So today we continue our discussion, our open dialogue actually, about the some of the SP ties or the inter-tie scheduling, how they're going to be working under the EDAM. And the ISO has actually heard the many comments that came as we received them through the different channels. And we do realize that there are a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about the how fast we are moving into making changes to the current locations where we have our interties being scheduled, whether it is for market scheduling or for the CRR purposes or for the resource adequacy showing. We have, as an ISO, we are actually interested in making sure that everybody is ready for making any, whenever we make those changes in our market design. So we are hearing those comments and those concerns, and we would like actually to work with you in order to address those concerns and work on a transition plan, maybe acceptable, that will be taking us through the journey together in order for us to maintain our timing and our go-live date for the EDAM in May 1st of 2026. We acknowledge and we do realize that we are moving a little bit fast on this SP tie, and we would like to give more time for both our market participants and for ourselves as an ISO to evaluate both the technical approach as well as giving our participants more time to evaluate the impact on their businesses and current practices and ensure that everybody is ready for this change. We also hear that it is not that the participants are against those changes, or there seems to be a wide recognition that there is some inefficiencies that we currently have in our market that those changes can address and can resolve. It is actually how fast we are moving, and without giving enough time for everybody to evaluate the impact of those changes. So today we will, Milosh is going to summarize the concerns, but George and James, they will talk about a proposal for the transition period of time where we could stay with our maybe current SB ties. And what does that mean in terms of market scheduling, in terms of CRR locations, and in terms of the resource adequacy for that matter. Also, I would like to emphasize that with this transition, our hope is that we are decoupling the need for more time for our stakeholders to realign their businesses and practices to this new paradigm, to decouple that from the EDAM concept and the EDAM market itself that is moving forward, and that we are currently, as I indicated probably last time, we are in market simulation period, and market simulation is going to continue, I think, till mid-January. Our plan is to move to the parallel operation in February. Things are looking very promising so far, but we have really to agree on today, and maybe in the, if we need more time also in the, we can arrange for more workshops on this particular issue. And our hope, as I mentioned, is to decouple this from the rest of the EDAM. We are trying to propose today an approach that very much mimic, to as much as we can what is happening today in terms of the scheduling, and has less impact on the CRR and the RA. But at the same time, there are some special cases and special scheduling points that we would like to discuss with you, and George and James will go in more detail with that. Without taking a lot of your time, I think I will hand it over to Joanne to probably say a few words, and then we'll go to Milosh.
Thanks, Khaled. Thanks, Khaled. Good morning, everyone. Joanne Serena here, Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement and Customer Experience. I just wanted to say thank you for joining us for today's meeting. I know we typically try to avoid stakeholder meetings on Fridays, so I wanted to thank you for accommodating today's meeting. But we felt it was important to meet sooner rather than later, given the sense of urgency we felt from stakeholders at the last workshop. So appreciate the number of attendees tuning in today. So, as Khaled mentioned, since last week's workshop, we've received comments via the commenting tool, which have been made publicly available. So those comments that came in this last week are posted. Hopefully we'll be addressing some of the comments and feedback in today's discussion from those comments, and we'll continue to leave that comments window open for a few weeks after today's call as well, so that you can submit feedback and comments on what you hear today and today's discussion. So lastly, I just want to thank stakeholders for your engagement on this matter. Your insights and feedback are important to us to ensure we are in lockstep with the EDAM implementation. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Milosh, who's going to go over what we think we've heard over the past week, and certainly discuss with you and validate with all of you today. So, Milosh?
Thank you, Joanne, and we can go to the next slide. And as Joanne and Khaled noted, we wanted to acknowledge and just take stock of the feedback that we received from the November 5th and 6th implementation workshop on the intertie schedule modeling in EDAM, where we discuss more in detail the generation aggregation point tie modeling and the shift from SP ties to gap tie modeling. We've heard a number of concerns and feedback from you through various forums, comments, city tickets, as well as offline discussions, but also feedback that we heard during the workshops themselves. And we wanted to make sure that we acknowledge those, capture them accurately, and allow room as well for you to share with us additional feedback or validate these concerns that we've heard, because I think they're, as you'll hear later, they're shaping the steps that we are going to be suggesting next and where we may go next on this topic. So you see them here. I'll walk through each one of these one by one, but I want to make sure that your comments are acknowledged and recognized here, and if anything is missing, we'll leave room after I walk through these for you to come on the phone and share if these are it, if there's something that hasn't been captured. One of the areas that we've heard is that the implementation modeling changes that we introduced and discussed more in detail regarding gap tie modeling has a significant impact on some of the existing and contractual arrangements at the CAISO interties. I think we recognize that the ISO, or the CAISO balancing area, has supported robust intertie bidding transactions across all of its interties, and that there's arrangements that have been made in place, some of them long-term, that rely on the current structure of schedule point time modeling or SP time modeling, and moving to these gaps may have some impacts on those commercial arrangements, and you've noted that for us, that you may need time to evaluate what those are, the extent of those impacts, and how to consider managing them to the extent that we move to those gap tie scheduling points at some point. We've also heard that some of the complications of modeling gap ties and aligning the gap tie modeling to the extent that we move to that approach, some of the concerns with aligning that modeling with the allocation of congestion revenues, both in the annual process as well as the monthly process, particularly for 2026, which is, when in May, EDAM would go live. And if there's a discrepancy between the gap ties that are in the market and how CRRs are modeled and settled at the scheduling point locations. And so we've heard concerns with aligning that modeling and settlement for CRRs for 2026. Another concern that we heard is the uncertainty associated with the gap tie pricing settlement as compared to scheduling point ties or SP ties today, and concerns with how that pricing may differ. And again, what that may mean for your commercial arrangements that you have in place for 2026 in particular, and what impact that may have on those commercial arrangements and how to address those potentially in a short time frame. And that's what the next concern as well kind of hits on that theme of the time frame for adjusting those commercial arrangements or bidding practices or participation practices at the CAISO interties. That if we were to move towards gap tie modeling of intertie transactions of the CAISO interties in May of 2026, the time frame just would not allow for feasible consideration of those practices or adjustments to some of those commercial arrangements. So there was a concern with the timing to allow for consideration over the impacts, but also with adjusting any impacted commercial arrangements. And then finally, I think another theme that we heard is just the general need to better understand the gap tie modeling under some more realistic scenarios when transacting at the CAISO interties, and that may help stakeholders better understand what the impact may be on the commercial arrangements. So these are some of the themes that, again, we've heard throughout the workshop, post-workshop, and the different manner in which you may have submitted those to us. And we wanted to just acknowledge those and take a step to see if those are the appropriate concerns that we heard. Is there anything that's missing here? I think we do want to understand better the full picture of some of those potential impacts that you perceive of moving to gap time modeling, as that, again, will help inform where we go from here and the transition design that we may want to consider. So I think this is a good spot to take some comments and and some of your feedback as well, and feel free to add anything that may be missing to some of these concerns if you haven't seen your comments reflected.
Yeah, Milosh, just before we take questions, just one last thing I think you touched based on, but it is also we heard that market participants would like to see the prices of the gap tie for a certain period of time before we move to another. So that's because currently those gap tie prices are posted on a gap basis, not gap tie association. Thank you. Yeah, you can. Questions?
First question we have is from Callie Wells. Go ahead, Callie. Could you get a little closer to your mic? You're coming in a little faintly.
Yeah, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So first of all, wanted to say thank you guys for holding this extra meeting and having this conversation with stakeholders in response to kind of the conversations that took place last week. I did want to note on kind of your slide where you were going over the concerns that you heard from stakeholders. I felt like we had a couple additional concerns that I wanted to make sure were reflected, and they weren't necessarily related to the timing or how quickly this process is moving, but it was also related to some of the bidding that we heard coming out of the meetings last week, and two of them jumped to mind. One is that if you are an import resource, a non-resource specific import resource, and you're not adjacent to the CAISO BAA, you can no longer economically offer at the CAISO BAA like you can today. You're going to be forced to self-schedule at the BAA that you are adjacent to. So that was one of the concerns that we had, as well as the creation of the G-gap and some bidding around that, mostly because that G-gap, that pricing and scheduling point is just a day-ahead concept from our understanding, and it doesn't exist in real time. So then you have to liquidate it at an unknown real-time price and reschedule through different nodes in real time. So those two were just two additional concerns I wanted to make sure were understood, because again, it's not necessarily about the pace at which this information is coming out relative to go live, but there were some additional market and bidding practices that we wanted to kind of talk through as well.
No, thank you, Callie. Very good point. Thank you.
Next in the queue, we have Don Trethewey. Go ahead, Don.
I really have a clarifying question. So the changes that we're looking at in terms of the pricing of CAISO interties, is that just applying to CAISO, and Pacific Corp, for example, is still going to use the gap tie pricing for its interties?
Yeah, Don, this is Khalid. Yeah, we will go over what that means, but yes, this is particularly, we're talking about the CAISO SP tie, the internal, the ones that are not in EDAM, and as well as the ones that are in the EDAM area. For Pacific Corp, they will use the D-gap or the gap tie pricing, which is a concept that the WEIMs have seen in the real-time market. And George will have a slide to even talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Khaled. I understand that the gap tie pricing is used in EIM today, but base schedules aren't financially settled, so that pricing only plays a very limited role. I also have my understanding is that Pacific Corp is not implementing full gap tie pricing. They're simply just having gap tie pricing with the adjacent balancing authority area. So for example, if there's a tie with BPA, that they would just use, and only with BPA, that the only available D gap would be BPAT, even if I was wheeling power, for instance, from Idaho, where I should use an Idaho D gap, correct?
No, we'll talk about it. I mean, this is this is like the 1 DGAB tie methodology that Pacific Corp is implementing, and also for the remember there's a concern about the multiple prices, so this will solve that issue for us when we limit it to the 1 DGAB tie for the EDAM entity ties. But again, I don't want to jump ahead of the Don, if you can hold your question till George can tell us exactly what's the proposal, and then we can start maybe talking
Will
about
do, but I think you've clarified for me that this is it's broader than just the CAISO. CAISO intertie pricing may be driving this, but there's going to be broader clarifications.
The big one is, of course, the CAISO intertie pricing, and that will, hopefully we can give the clarity for the people who are participating in the CRR, participating in the RA, showing what is needed from them, what are the changes that they're expecting, and to try to reduce that impact as much as possible until, this stakeholder process we can reach to a better solution than what we currently have today, try to resolve some inefficiencies if possible, but at the same time, don't go too fast without, because we don't want to create more problems than what we currently have.
Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Next in the queue, we have Dan Williams. Go ahead, Dan.
Good morning, Dan Williams from the Energy Authority. So, Milos, I think you did a great job of summarizing things here. I just wanted to pick on one more kind of overarching theme, and that's just knowing that this is a sort of everything that CAISO does is a very complex systems thinking type problem of change one thing and it impacts 100 others. But unfortunately, that's just the world that we live in with our energy markets in the West. And so as we go through things today, and then just even thinking about future enhancements, I really encourage us to continue working on a process of identifying for any given change, what does that mean for other processes and other things happening outside of maybe the immediate day ahead or real time market that are extremely important to the entities participating in those markets. And one of those, or a few of those, are thinking about those forward contracts and the things you noted on this slide. But others are also just thinking forward to the next 1, 2, 3 years, where we know that there are additional BAs coming in, Bank, LA, PGE next year. And as each of those come in, that's going to change kind of how any of the changes impact the rest of the West as well. So when we're looking at things to enhance, to make changes, I'm hoping we can also think about what do we need to get done by the time this BA comes in, because that BA, the interconnectivity that they're bringing, the types of transactions that are going through them now, really changes the landscape of how EDAM is operating, and try to look across time for what needs to be done when, as we're giving entities time to adapt. And in the background of that, also just make sure that we're keeping EIM being EIM as it was promised to be, that it maintains being a voluntary market, that it is still a place that entities can choose their interaction with their BA, choose how their generation and transmission is used within the tariffs of the BAs that they live within. So there's just a few kind of overarching things, but just overall, I've been very appreciative for how the last week or so has played out, and just look forward to building on all this work going forward.
No, thank you, Dan. Very good point. And I think that's part of, once we get a little bit later into the slides, I think that those will be some of the factors in considering the structure of the transition period, some of the considerations as the EDAM footprint grows, and informing the timing of establishing that transitional design. So really appreciate you raising that.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm not seeing any further questions at this time.
So let me just, Joanne here, just wanted to kind of maybe just do another check-in with stakeholders. We want to make sure we captured all the main themes that we think we heard. So it sounds like, the addition of Callie's comments, and I think, Dan, you bring up a good point, and we're definitely taking that back to the entire team, and and we'll factor that into moving forward. But there's no other hands. It sounds like I think we captured everything. I just want to make sure we're hearing everybody out, and then we can kind of move forward here in this process.
And as you noted, Joanne, the comment period is open, so as we go through this discussion later today and even the stuff from the earlier workshops, if other things come up, you can always submit those concerns, questions through that process as well that we'll look to address.
And I'd like to add also that even though we are, right now doing market sim for Pacific Coast, we appreciate if people, if there is any comments about the onboarding of Portland General, that, we start getting those. To Dan's point, the sooner we can identify some of any issue, then that gives us a little bit more time to work together on the issue and not get into any surprises, last-minute surprises. Portland General, they will start also their market simulation kind of also very soon, within a month and a half or something like that. So if there is any issues, when you're doing your comments, if there is comments or concerns about when PAC is onboarded or that Portland General is onboarded, please let us know as soon as you can. Thank you. All right.
Yes, I think we will turn it now to Khaled. We're going to now transition to that, some of the design considerations in light of your comments, how we're proposing and moving forward.
Next slide. All right, so we talked a lot, but I think we are trying, or we're hoping that we can get an agreement on a transition phase where we retain our current SB-type modeling for the California intertie scheduling points with the non-EDAM balancing areas. So those ones, there is no change for what you have currently today. There is a special treatment for SB ties that fall within the EDAM balancing area, and George will cover those different details for both of these. We are, and this is more for the scheduling, market scheduling in particular, these differences are, in order for us to be able to solve the market and optimize the market footprint and get the benefit of the EDAM for all parties. We are retaining the full scheduling point tie modeling and settlement of the CRRs on the CAISO system for the year of 2026 for both the annual and the monthly auctions. That stays the same by maintaining all of our current scheduling and SB ties that we currently offer. And so the CRR auction, we had a quick call with the CRR participants, and we wanted to move forward with giving the certainty for our CRR holders that the auctions that will be conducted are actually using the exact same SB ties that we currently have. Our holders will continue to benefit from the value of the CRRs that they hold on those SB ties, and George and James in their presentation later on today will show us how we can maintain that value and the hedging that our participants are buying through those mechanisms. We want to also engage in a discussion for the duration of this transitional period. Right now, we are seeing it not to be less than the year of the 2026, so that we give ourselves and by that I mean both the market participants and the ISO time to work out on and resolve any concerns and reach to more of a balanced approach between resolving inefficiencies, but at the same time not impacting or not making too many changes, non-feasible or non-reasonable changes in terms of practice or in terms of commercial contracting. So we would like to agree, and we're hoping, as a result of this discussion, what that transition period could be, so we can move forward based on that assumption. I think those are the main thing in my mind. There is, as I said, some technical. Of course, there is a lot of technical descriptions of each of those items, but I want to leave it for George and James to take us through some. Next slide. I think this is my only slide. Right? Yeah. With that, George Angelides, our executive principal for market power systems and market technology, will take us through this proposal for the transition period. George?
Thank you, Khalid. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to walk through, briefly if I can, through what we're thinking about the EDAM transitional period to leave time for our stakeholders to have discussion, voice their concerns, questions, comments, which is the objective actually of this call. There are two objectives that we want to accomplish in the EDAM transitional period. The first objective is to maintain the existing scheduling point intertie combinations that we have at the ISO interties today in our day-ahead market for the ISO Balancing Authority area. For all purposes that we're using them today in the day-ahead market, there are two exceptions for the interties with Pacificorp. We'll talk about this more in detail. But for every other scheduling point intertie location, we'll maintain the scheduling, the distribution of the schedule to these locations. We'll maintain these locations for CRR sources and sinks, for RA imports and RA sewing, and of course the L&T calculation based on the distribution of these locations. All of this will be exactly the same as it is done in today's day-ahead market. And one example that you probably are all familiar is for the Malin 500 intertie. Essentially, the scheduling point will be the Malin 5 and 101 location as today for all intertie activity at Malin 500. That is aligned with our second objective, where we are going to consolidate all the multiplicity of potential prices at the same intertie location, which was coming into the picture with the multiple gap tie combinations for the same tie. So this is coming down now to a single SP tie location. We believe this will bring in simplicity for the beginning of the market and will provide some guidance for our stakeholders to evaluate their scheduling activity and CRR participation and RA participation and all of that. Also, we will be maintaining all the intertie scheduling limits, you know them as ISLs or IPCs, that constrain intertie scheduling activity today at the ISO interties. So none of that will change, will remain the same. And to align with the second objective of reducing the multiplicity of prices to a single price per intertie, will extend the same concept to the non-ISO interties for EDAM BAAs and EIM BAAs. Today, these interties are using the gap tie combination concept. It's been used since we launched the EIM back in 2014. We will also be using a single gap tie for these interties to have a single price for the given intertie, and they will be used for scheduling, schedule distribution, and LMP calculation the same as today. Which gap tie we will be using for this? It will be the adjacent BAA D gap for the specific tie. This answers Don's question. So for a specific tie, let's say that Pacific Northwest has with Bonneville Power Administration, we'll be using the BPAT D gap tie combination to price all scheduling activity at that intertie with Pacific Northwest. While we're doing this, although we do have the objective, as I mentioned, for a single price, there is an exception for tie gens. We will maintain the TGs the same as today. So any dynamic schedules to an EDAM intertie from, let's say, an EIM BAA or a non-EIM BAA, these TGs today, they reflect the location of the associated physical supply resource in the EIM or non-EIM BAA where it's coming from because it's linked to that. So therefore, the price for the TG really reflects the physical location of that resource. It's similar to pseudo ties actually, and we're maintaining that. We don't want to make any changes to dynamic schedules. Now, as a consequence of using a single price per tie, we have introduced the concept of the generic gap, and now, because of the single price per tie that we want to accomplish in that objective, we believe that the G-gap is not going to be useful as a concept, because even if we define one for a specific tie, an ISO tie will be the same SP tie that will be used for scheduling. So instead of having the additional burden of defining the G-gap and actually trying to use it in the scheduling, our recommendation here, what we're thinking is to, although we'll define the G-gap north and south the way we mentioned in our original proposal for publishing prices, and I'll get to that in a moment, instead of using some G-gap price or some G-gap location, we propose to use the ISO SP tie that we maintain for ISO ties instead, and for an EDAM BAA to use the EDAM gap tie or the EIM gap tie, as I mentioned earlier, which is the adjacent BAA D gap for each tie. So although only these prices, the SP tie and the adjacent BAA gap tie will be used for pricing intertie schedules in the transitional period, we intend to define all the gaps as they are today and all the gap tie definitions, more importantly, and we will publish LMPs for all these locations. Even if they're not going to be used for scheduling, we'll publish them for information to guide participants in evaluating future scheduling activities, perhaps after the transitional period, or any kind of comments, concerns that they may have by looking at these prices. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, this is the general plan for ISO interties. There are two exceptions for day one, and in general, going forward, for interties with the ISO that are becoming now EDAM interties because on the other side, the balancing authority area is joining EDAM. For day one, we have two of those. One is between ISO and PAC West. That's at CRAG. The intertie name is CRAG. The scheduling point is Gragview. So you have an SP tie location, Gragview, which is going to be converted essentially to a transfer location between ISO and PAC West. So you will not have intertie scheduling activity at that location. Instead, you will have EDAM transfers and, of course, EIM transfers between ISO and PAC West. It will still be constrained, this transfer, by the ITC that we have at CRAG, which is the Cascade ITC. A little bit similar the situation with the MONA scheduling point for ISO schedules. The intertie name is MDWP, so the SP tie is MONA 3, MDWP. That also will be used for transfers between ISO and Pacific Corp East. It will still be constrained by all the ITCs that constrain this location today, so there's no change on that. I'll list the ITCs for your information. It's a little bit more complicated. We have multiple ITCs for that location. They're concentric. They include additional scheduling points as you move out. That is not going to change from today. So it's more important to note here that although you will still be able to use these SP ties for CRR sources and sinks and for RA monthly sewing, there will not be any intertie scheduling activity on these interties because now they're EDAM interties and you have transfers instead. So specifically for the RA sewing, you can sew your RA at the scheduling, at the system resource that, of course, we will be able to register for you at these locations, but that system resource is not going to be biddable in the market. So therefore, when we talk about the RA in the next slide, any RA sewing that is on this resource has to be reassigned before we run the day-ahead market. I want to mention also here that there is another intertie that we have at the same scheduling location. I'm not saying scheduling point because the scheduling point, we define it differently for that. So the intertie is MPAC. This intertie is used today for intertie schedules and transfers with Pacific Corp East that they don't involve the ISO. So for this location, we will maintain it as it is today with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power default gap for using it for imports and exports into and out of Pacific Corp East that, you know, we will model them from LA, but they could be, you know, from further out as well. So I want to make a quick stop here before I touch array. So if you have any questions or requests for clarification or comments on the intertie scheduling aspect only, because we're going to get to array and CRRs in future slides.
Thanks, George. First in the queue, we have a question from Rohan Chatterjee. Go ahead, Rohan.
Yeah. Hey, good morning. Rohan Chatterjee from Pacific Corp. So, George, just regarding the second bullet, I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. On day one, MONA will be a transfer location between Pacific Corp East and the Cal ISO?
Correct.
Okay, got it. And then for the last bullet, for the DGAP LADWP point, is that supposed to represent the system resource that would effectuate transfers between LA and PACE?
Correct. That will be a location that can be used for registering system resources for imports and exports into and out of Pacific Corp East to Los Angeles. And it can also be used more generally for any intertie schedule that you will have into Pacific Corp that doesn't involve EDAM BAAs. It's coming from a non-EDAM BAA.
Okay, thank you.
And I see James has his hand up. James, did you want to add anything there? You might be double muted if you're speaking, James.
Yeah, so MONA today is split in modeling between the transmission between the ISO and PAC East and LA and PAC East. And that's why you have MDWP represents the transmission between the ISO and PAC East, where MPAC represents the transmission between LA and PAC East. Today, that is being rolled up by the entity under their base transfers. As Mark at EDAM, and as transmission customer scheduling coordinators, you are going to be submitting self-schedules here. You will, if you're coming from an EIM BAA like LADWP, you would submit it on MPAC if it's going to PAC East. I just want to show that transition from WEIM.
Thank you, James.
Does that address
Rohan, could we unmute Rohan one more time to make sure that answers Rohan's question?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, I think the point that James was just trying to make was that the last bullet is effectively trying to address transfers from the EIM BAA, which would be LADWP, to PAC East. I think that's what I just understood from that comment that James made. Is that correct?
So today they're transfers. Well, yeah, today they're transfers. In the future, they'll be bid in. Sorry, George.
Yeah, so as you know, once Pacificorp joins EDAM, they will not have base transfers in real time, but they will still have dynamic transfers or static transfers with other EIM BAAs, and the MPAC intertie could be used and will be used as today for this kind of transfers between Pacificorp East and LADWP. And of course, the intertie schedules in the day-ahead market and in the hour-ahead scheduling process, the way we described it in the workshop.
Yeah, set up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next in the queue, we have Carrie Bentley. Go ahead, Carrie.
Done.
If we could mute C. Bentley, I believe that's Carrie Bentley.
Hi, can you hear me now? This is Carrie Bentley with WPTF.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much. Can you turn to slide 14?
Sure.
After the CRR call on Wednesday, I was under the impression that on this call, the CAISO was going to propose different options for, I guess you're calling it the transitional period. I was wondering if you had other methodologies that you considered besides this one.
So Carrie, in that CRR, we said we were going to have more discussions on the transitional period. It wasn't intended for this call. This call is to go over everything but the transitional, like the beyond the transitional period. In the transitional period stuff, and I'll go into more detail in my slides, we're going to treat it basically like we said in that CRR meeting. We are going to do it at the scheduling point as it is today, and I'll go more details later.
Oh, I see. I think I was confused. Maybe can you define again what you mean by what's the transitional period and whether this is a proposal for some point later in time, but we're going to maintain functionality as today for a certain amount of time? I guess I'm getting a little confused what's being presented here and when it will be implemented.
Kerry, we mentioned on the CRR and today that we will establish a transition period that goes throughout the 2026 year. And in this transition period, when EDAM goes live, we will be maintaining our current scheduling points for California ISO, the ones that are not inside EDAM areas. Those will continue to be available to you to bid or schedule, as well as put CRR, in the CRR holder auctions, as well as those are locations where you could show your RA showing, monthly RA showing, all of that will be maintained, which is similar to what you have today. And we want, during this period of time, to agree on another, how can we move forward with the gap tie approach for California balancing area. We are moving forward with the gap tie approach for the EDAM interties, but at one point we would like also to move forward with the gap tie approach for California. How does that look like? That's, we're open to discussion. But what we currently are proposing is basically to hold the status quo, basically, that we have today and give you more time to think about it and give our, the whole market participant the time to evaluate its impact. And hopefully we can reach to a transition period, sunset or date or whatever for this status quo and move into the gap tie approach. But for today, we are just saying those scheduling points will act like what they are doing today. There is nuance around the two that George mentioned inside Pacific Corp. One is in Pacific Corp East and the other is in Pacific Corp West, because those are now inside the EDAM. And every time like an EDAM joins, if California also has scheduling points, those will be treated very similar to these PAC East and PAC West. Hopefully, we can get to that final solution and we can move into that final state, or at least I would say more acceptable state regarding the gap type. Because as you know, the gap type solves some inefficiencies and some accuracies that we currently have. And what we hear so far is it's a good idea, but it's not as good to move quickly into that without evaluating all of its impact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Next in the queue, we'll go to Zach Gill Sanford. Go ahead, Zach.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Zach.
Okay, thank you. This is Zach Gill Sanford with Utilicast on behalf of Pacific Core Transmission. Can we go back to slide 15?
Yes.
I do want to clarify, because I think that there's been some back and forth here on the MONA tie in particular that does not reflect the current state in EIM, nor the, I'll say, current plan for Pacific Core's PACE EDAM model. So in particular, what I want to clarify is that Pacific Core East does not currently have EIM transfers between PACE and CAISO at MONA, largely due to LADWP being the intermediate BA at MONA, and there being some challenges, to my understanding, on the DC IPP DC dispatch that preclude those EIM transfers between PACE and CAISO being in place today. As a result, Pacific Core does not currently have the MONA tie listed as a planned EDAM transfer location between PACE and CAISO. So we are in ongoing discussions with LADWP on this topic, but I just want to make that clear and not sort of propagate confusion on that front. We would certainly welcome CAISO's input and discussion in those points. We had thought that coordination had occurred to date. Thank you.
Yeah, Zach, thank you for the clarification. Yes, currently the transfer is between LA and PAC on those locations. And yes, there is a discussion between, how to create or accomplish a transfer between PAC East and CAISO, which involves LA, and we are looking into that from a technical point of view. What does it mean? Your clarification is spot on. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Zach. Next in the queue, we have Dan Williams. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, Dan Williams from TEA. So just thinking through this in real time here, and I feel like hopefully, like many others, have been kind of bouncing back and forth between happiness and anxiety here with some of these changes, because I think that moving to or staying with, I guess, as you had previously said, a gap tie methodology for imports and exports from the EDAM, the non-CAISO EDAM BAs, is very problematic with the current congestion revenue allocation design. And I can try to walk through an example of why, if that's okay.
Sure.
So in the instance, and again, doing this on the fly, in the instance of, say, let's say a generator in, let's say, Tucson's BA that has sold firm energy to a load serving entity in Pacific Core East and has transmission rights to, let's say, Four Corners, and then the entity within PACE has transmission rights from Four Corners to their load within PACE. If we were to just assign a DGAP to that transaction, that would be importing to PACE as the reference price. I expect the modeled congestion for that would spread across Four Corners, Red Butte, trying to think of all the interties down there without looking at them, but I think 4 or 5 different, say, points of import into PAC East that in an injection assumed to be at the Tucson DGAP would be flowing to. And the problem with our congestion revenue allocation is that the load serving entity in PACE can only get a congestion hedge if they have 7FN rights on a specific path from a specific PACE intertie to their load. So in this case, if they do a balanced self-schedule, that congestion hedge that they would get from Four Corners to their load would only cover them for that percentage of the congestion impact from the DGAP. And even if we were to move to or if they were to do a CGAP, I think there would still be a similar situation of a lack of connection under the congestion revenue allocation. A lot of times these transactions are done at hubs, though, forward transactions for firm energy that then have to be wheeled through a tie. So it gets even more disconnected from the DGAP methodology the more that you look at like how entities are actually going to have to purchase firm energy to meet their resource efficiency, to do any sort of economic hedging prior to the EDAM. So for me, for the same reasons that it makes sense to stay with SP tie for CAISO in this transition, it 100% has to be an SP tie or tie gen, obviously, for the EDAM areas as well, until we get a more cohesive, comprehensive EDAM footprint and deal with some of the congestion revenue allocation issues. Yeah, that feels like the only direction that this can or should go in, and I'm curious what you think about that from a connection between day ahead and EIM, knowing that EIM would be in that DGAP space. But since the only direct congestion allocation happens in day ahead, maybe that's what's more important to target here. But I'll just see what sort of response that brings out.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dan, I think thank you for bringing this example, but probably we want, maybe if we can have a, city or some comment to work out this particular example. But then conceptually, we're trying to move from the scheduling point inefficiencies into a more accuracy in terms of the physical flows where things may be coming from and represent them, and then also try to anticipate the impact on the congestion and all of that. But it looks like you have a special case that if you could help us by writing it, so we can, maybe it will help, in the transition period when we are having these discussions about what is the right thing to transition to. I think that's probably your comments are more appropriate for that, which will be some other.
I understand. I know it's difficult to talk through specific cases. I was just trying to give a case to illustrate, but it's in no way a special case. I think the vast majority of transactions that load serving entities within PAC West or PAC East will be doing just prior to EDAM in order to meet resource efficiency or deal with outages, and transmission or generation outages are going to involve continuing to participate in index purchases at our established trading hubs in the West, and that those transactions are easy to register in PacifiCorp's EDAM customer portal to get the right resource sufficiency accounting. But if their price reference and their congestion reference does not line up well with where they're able to get a congestion hedge, we're breaking a very important sort of link promise that's been embedded in the congestion revenue allocation design that is there for year one of EDAM. So it really doesn't matter if we talk about a source in BPA or Nevada or anywhere else. It's the same thing of PAC has and CAISO has set up a methodology that requires injection at the SP ties to deal with the congestion impact for the LSEs that are trying to hedge. I would love to have a different program, but that's what we've got. So I want to see if anyone else on the call has thoughts on this, though. I do have some other comments on the Mona situation, but I want to just see what else is out there too.
Yeah, so Dan, just to recap, what you're suggesting is, and we can look at this more through some scenarios on our side as well, but is if somebody were to exercise their firm transmission rights from an import location to a load in the EDAM area, you want to make sure that, if we retain the DGAP aspect for EDAM interties, that you're ultimately able to get that full congestion hedge associated with that exercise of rights, that the pricing associated with the DGAP doesn't somehow leave you unhedged when you exercise those rights.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing as staying at an SP tie for the multiple intertie points that you all have in Southern California. You just get different impacts, and that's the fortunate thing on the CRR side is you can go out and spread that across multiple ties. You can't do that as a EDAM LSE within PACE or PAC West.
Okay, yeah, let us validate that, run through some scenarios,
Yeah, we'll take it back and think more about that. But you said you had something related to Mona. You wanted to... Yeah,
but why don't I drop out of the queue and come back in after and see if there's anyone else in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Next in the queue, we have Steve Keen. Go ahead, Steve. You might be double muted out there. We hear you now, Steve.
Okay, let's try again. Steve Keen from Edison. I have kind of a strange question. You talk about the points going from the CAISO into PAC East and PAC West. Can you discuss the point from PAC West to PAC East? And
PAC West to PAC East, they have established transfer locations today that are used in EIM, and the same location will be used for EDAM transfers in EDAM as well, Steve.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next in the queue, we have Daniel Cretu. Go ahead, Daniel. we please try unmuting Daniel one more time?
It's not in the queue.
There's Shane.
You hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, this is Daniel Coach with California Department of Water Resources. On slide 15, the first two bullet points, Craigview and Mona, you guys said that the third bullet applies to both of them. It says will be CRR source sinks, array showing but no intertie scheduling. That apply to both two above?
Yes.
Okay, and we found them, the Craigview and Mona, we find them in the CRR source list. So already we could request in 2026 annual CRR allocation. We could have requested CRR source at Craigview and Mona. The question is that part of the transition period that will schedule that will be settled those points representing Pacific West intertie and Pacific East intertie, Pacific Corp. Now, he said there's no intertie scheduling with ISO, then we're not going to run automatically in a CRR auction efficiency problems, since the CRR revenues payments are not backed up to intertie scheduling, or the schedule goes beyond the interties.
Hey, Daniel, I'd like to hold this question till after I do my slides. It's
Okay,
pertinent in that discussion.
Sounds good. I have another question then. You mentioned the DGAP LAWP will be available for intertie scheduling with Pacific Corp East. Is when that availability is going to be prior to the May implementation or later on? And
May 1st, the transitional period.
is part of
when PAC East goes live in EDAM, this relationship becomes active, so for you to be able to schedule on. So it's like, are you asking if you can put bids in 7 days in advance or something like that?
No, it's going to be part of. We can use it as CRR source. This after the after in the transition period.
The answer is no on that, because the MPAC is a PAC East intertie, and it's not an ISO intertie. So right now, CRRs is only for ISO balancing authority area, so we won't have that as a CRR scheduling point.
I understood. So we stay with Silmar, Silmarla _2 _9001 and Silmar DC. Will be any tie, any correlation between DGAP this one that you posted in slide 15 and Silmar, the current existing intertie scheduling points, Silmarla and Silmar DC _2 _9001? There'll be any correlation?
So if your question is, I'm trying to repeat your question when I'm hearing it, is if the intertie schedules at the DGAP LA DWP to MPAC has the ability to provide congestion hedge for your in the CRRs, it would for ISO constraints, but not EDAM BAA constraints.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So so the congestion revenue allocation initiative is going to apply here.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Next in the queue, we have Nadia Krantz. Go ahead, Nadia. You might be double muted if you're speaking, Nadia.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Hi. Yes. Nadia Krantz with Pacific Corp. I just wanted to go back to an example that was given just for my own understanding. So the example was PAC has a D gap with BPAT. And then there was also the introduction that introduces a generic gap. Can you guys describe or kind of talk a little bit about the D gap relation to the generic gap and why that would be introduced or not introduced? I wasn't fully capturing that. Thank you.
Yeah, so because of the objective to consolidate all the multiplicity of prices to a single price at a given intertie, we find no use during the transitional period for the G gap, because even if we define a generic gap, it will have to be defined for each tie. It will be the same SP tie location for an ISO intertie or the same gap tie location for a non-ISO intertie. So there is no reason to burden your systems with having another generic, another gap out there to deal with. So the proposal from our end here, what we're thinking is you can use the single SP tie location for an ISO tie or the single gap tie location for a non-ISO tie, in which case you don't need to consider the generic gap during the transitional period. And you mentioned the C gap. The C gap is the custom gap. When we had an established term for the generation aggregation point, we were all using that term for different things, like we had the G gap was the generic, the D gap was the default. The C gap is a custom gap that we were associating with tie gens. Since we're dropping all this discussion for the gap, to keep things simple, the tie gens already use the pricing location for the associated physical resource that is behind the tie gen, because tie gen is a resource specific, a representation of an import coming from a physical resource in an EIM or a non-EIM BAA. So no reason to also refer to the C gap anymore. Introduces a little bit of misunderstanding and complexity here that we don't need to deal with. We said that we're not going to be changing the concept of the tie gen or how they're modeled. So they do have their own price based on the physical resource location that is associated with the tie gen, and we're not going to refer to it as a custom gap at this point. It's the physical resource location of the associated resource. Does that clarify things?
Yeah, that does. So when we are thinking about generic gaps, are those also non-resource specific?
Yes, the generic gap, the way we proposed it in our workshops was a non-resource specific generation aggregation point that span multiple balancing authority areas, non-EDAM balancing authority areas, and we separated to north and south. The idea was that you will be using potential as a scheduling coordinator, a non-resource specific generation aggregation point for the purpose of scheduling in the day-ahead market where the source balancing authority area or for an import or the sink balancing authority area for an export is not known at the time frame of the day-ahead market. But since we'll be using now a single location per tie throughout, you don't need to use the generic gap anymore. You'll be using the single location that is associated with a specific tie.
Okay, so then I also see, and I'm looking at your prior slide, the transitional period where it says you can use the KISO SP tie or the EDAM EIM gap tie instead. That just is based off of where the location of the D gap is at for pricing purposes.
So for the ISO intertie, we won't be using the generation aggregation point concept. We'll be using the existing scheduling point tie combinations that are used in today's day-ahead market. The location where we distribute the intertie schedules on the SP tie is actually the scheduling point. Like if you see at the top of the slide, that will be Malin 5 and 101 for the Malin 500 intertie, which is in use today. So we won't be making any change to that in the transitional period. Will be used the same way like it's used in the day-ahead market today. And for Pacific Corp interties, there will be a generation aggregation point defined for each intertie where we're going to represent the schedule and price the schedule, and that will be the adjacent BAA, EIM BAA or non-EIM BAA, depending. So in the case, I think I mentioned the example, if you have an intertie between, let's say, Bonneville Power Administration and Pacific Corp West, that intertie today is named BPAT.PAC West. So we will be using the BPAT DGAP to distribute intertie schedules into Pacific Corp West from BPA and pricing it accordingly.
Okay, that helps clarify. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next in the queue, we have a question from Dan Williams once more. Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, thanks. I can get into the Mona stuff. I'm glad I gave some time for other folks to get that out there because it helps clarify a few things. But just to follow up on that last point briefly, and I'm only saying this from a standpoint of just reinforcing that SP tie feels like for EDAM feels like the only feasible option. We often get guilty of just talking about transfers that are happening to the west of Pacificor, but they also are going to have multiple EDAM external interties to their north, east, and southeast. Coming in at the Deseret line from Craig into PAC East. You've got stuff coming in from DJ and coming in from further to the southeast. All of those, if you were to include that in your GGAP, all of those would end up having a very quote wrong reference point relative to where the energy is actually flowing from. And again, I don't have any problem with us continuing to work on future efficiency or anything like that. It's just like what's practically responsible to do for EDAM on May 1st to get a stable implementation that works for the entities that are in the Pacific Core BAs that have no choice but to participate, meet their resource efficiency, and try to deal with the new congestion pricing and other things. So as far as the Mona stuff goes, though, I'm trying to understand better just how and why that that path ends up with this different treatment. I know with the Crag portion of it that Pacificor Merchant owns all the rights on that facility, or at least that's as far as I'm aware. And it's a very direct one-for-one connection with the CAISO up there. And so that part makes sense. But for the path going out to Mona, as I understand it, there were some entities that had transmission rights on that are dropping those rights because of the change in the Intermountain project. And that those rights have freed up some space for EDAM transfers and have allowed CAISO to use that portion of LA's path effectively to go from many different points in sort of the SP15 bubble to get out to Mona. And so the question is just sort of how does that end up being an EDAM transfer and not just a point where anyone that is participating in CAISO's markets can export at Mona and then choose whether they're taking that power into PAC East or taking it into NV Energy system at that adjacency point at Mona. So if you can just share a little bit more about kind of how that's all constructed, that would be super helpful maybe to understand what you're proposing with this.
Dan, I think we should have some specific call or meeting with you to examine the specific scenarios you're thinking. maybe on this call, we should focus on the transitional period and take all these questions back and understand them first. Make sure that we have a good understanding of your scenario so that we can provide a good answer to them. As you know, we're not using SP tie for non-ISO BAAs today. We're using the DGAP tie, and I wasn't sure whether you're identifying a problem that exists today in our EIM, or you're more concerned with the transitional period when an EIM BAA like Pacificorp becomes an EDAM BAA, how their interties, their non-ISO interties will be used in that sense. So I wasn't exactly certain on the scope of your question.
I'm 100% focused on EDAM in this because EDAM is the one that has the direct congestion allocation, where everything in EIM is being managed, through the offsets. And within the EIM, there are so many non-participating resources that the offsets make sense because there generally are just just trying to say this as neutrally as possible, the BA-owned resources doing the optimization with each other. And so there's less specificity and less need to get proper direct allocation. But in EDAM, we have a lot more volume and a different way of managing the congestion allocation. So we need to be very specific about how entities interact with those prices. But the MONA question is more just about where we have these areas where a non-CAISO EDAM BA touches a CAISO EDAM BA, how do participants get to engage there, and who can and who can't transact for firm energy, for any number of reasons within that marketplace. I think it's great that you have maintained the ability for entities to get the CRRs going out to these points, but especially when we move to PGE coming in and having its own defined path to Malin, it raises just concerns about being able to have a competitive market with open access to it. If we start having different ways of getting to that intertie and different types of transactions permitted at that tie versus today.
Okay.
And I think that's what Carrie was getting to an extent, Carrie or Callie, just when talking about having to self-schedule in some instances, being able to economically bid in others to get to the CAISO BA.
Can I just offer, Khaled? This is Joanne. So Dan, I think we hear you, and I know that there's going to be detailed scenarios we're going to have to get into. Would you be able to submit sort of some scenarios in the comments template that we'll be able to work on and then bring back to the group?
Yeah, I'll try to refine them. I did submit some, but they were under the understanding that things were moving in a little bit different direction. So,
right.
And I'll work with the folks at WPTF too, because this isn't just it's definitely not just a TA issue. I mean, I'm thinking broadly about how the market interacts with this, and I want to make sure that it's representing just common transactions that entities are doing so that we don't accidentally, interrupt some really well-functioning markets. And that's the whole point overall. I 100% think that CAISO's intentions here are good in trying to improve efficiency. It's just looking at it from another angle and saying, is this the right thing for right now, or do we have to deal with maybe a middle ground before we get to some of these concepts?
Yeah, and then we really want to understand that scenario a little bit better, and I think just describing it with maybe a diagram or a scenario description, maybe more formal. I think that will give us better understanding. But I want to just before we break for the lunch, I want to make sure that the rest of participants here, they don't. I want to be clear of what we are talking about today. Today we are saying we will maintain the current for California ISO interties that are none in the EDAM balancing areas, or in this case Pacificorp, east or west. We will maintain those interties the same that we have them today. People can continue to bid on those, schedule, show their buy CRRs, do the RA showing on those, no change whatsoever. We will be calculating one price. We are distributing also whatever is cleared on those scheduling points at that same location that we are currently distributing. For the ones that are inside the EDAM area, which is Mona in Pac East, Great View in Pac West, those ones are going to be treated a little bit different because the fact that they are inside the EDAM now, they will be available, no change for the CRR and the monthly RA showing on those points. But when it comes to market scheduling, those needs to be, you know, if they are between that Pacific Corp and CAISO, that will be more of a transfer, that's consistent with the EDAM transfer. If they are between the Pacific Corp and other non-EDAM areas, we have either there is already an ETSR in the AIM world, or those will be like more of an import-export to the EDAM area. We are also stating that the EDAM interties, like Pacific Corp interties, will be using the gap tie, single gap tie, so each of the ties will be linked to whatever the adjacent balancing area to that tie. That's what we are talking about here. And the proposal is to maintain this status throughout this transition period until we have more discussion to find out what is probably more important, maybe more appropriate transition, and what does that look like. We are not determining what that final transition is looking like. What we are saying is that during this transition, and right now it's not going to be less than the 2026 in order to give the certainty for people of what that look like. If that period extended further, then and we have to onboard, let's say, another EDAM entity, then the same rules for this transition will be followed for the onboarding of that additional EDAM entities until a final solution is reached. With that, I'd like maybe, should we take a break?
Well,
there is a question.
We have a couple more questions.
There is Zach and Stuart. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's take these two and then we can play.
Yeah.
If we could please unmute Zach.
Hi, thank you. This is Zach Sanford once again with Utilicast for Pacific Core Transmission. Dan, as you're stating that you're going to rewrite some scenarios, I want to clarify, restating what I said there earlier, that there are no planned transfers, EDAM transfers at Mona between PACE and CAISO for the initial implementation. As I mentioned, we're in ongoing discussions for that, but I just want to clarify that. I hope that helps your conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Next.
Yeah, and we clarified that one.
Yeah, we did.
Zach, just with the caveat that there may be, we are in technical discussions with LA and Pacific Corp in order to establish a transfer between CAISO and PAC. But there is some technical over the HVDC that we have over there. So just wanted to ensure that we don't skip that. It's not there today, but doesn't mean that it's not going to be there in the future.
Thank you. And last question we have is from Stuart Kelly. Go ahead, Stuart.
Stuart, maybe you're muted. Can't hear.
Yeah, you might be double muted, Stuart. You're unmuted on our end, but we'll try unmuting you once more.
There you go.
Your audio still isn't coming through, Stuart. We'll try circling back to you. after our break.
Or having it in the chat. We'll
Or-
follow up with you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Yes, we can take a break. We can follow up with Stuart and then.
Yes, so we'll break for lunch now and return at around 1:05 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. We're going to continue on this topic of transitional design. First, we'll be hearing from Mark Rothleader before we continue.
Yeah, just wanted to step in here. Colette had to step away for about an hour, and he asked me to join. It sounds like the discussion has been going well in terms of understanding, listening to the feedback. I appreciate all the stakeholders, good questions. I guess I will just maybe summarize one piece that I maybe think is not completely clear to everybody, and that is what we're proposing here is a transitional period where the interfaces, the non-EDAM interfaces, will continue to maintain the SP-tie location, not move to DGAP scheduling and so forth. However, for any EDAM interface, I think my understanding is the transition will effectively happen when the EDAM entity joins, and we will move from having the SP-tie available to that EDAM area in CAISO, and it will be what we've described before in terms of DGAP. So that's hopefully, me saying it one more time, hopefully provides some clarity, but if there's still some open questions, we can certainly dive deeper into this, but just wanted to make sure I understood and was conveying that. Otherwise, thank you for everybody on Friday being here and having this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And you know, George just went through over the last couple of slides, which we started with a substantive discussion on that proposal, transitional proposal to get us to EDAM and through EDAM implementation. And Mark summarized that. Before we move into a discussion on resource adequacy imports with the CAISO balancing area and how those will be scheduled based on what we just talked about, we just wanted to pause here, whether anybody had any questions that may still be lingering that we can clarify, or if you had a chance to think about this maybe over lunch a little bit. Before we move on, we wanted to just take a pause again and see, are there any more questions that we can clarify on this, on these last two slides, the treatment of the SP ties and the two ties with Pacificor before we move to RA?
Looks like we have a few hands raised. First, we'll go to Carrie Bentley. Go ahead, Carrie.
Reading forum. I appreciate, Mark, you coming on and explaining again what's changing. I think what you just said was different than my takeaway from before. So I'm wondering if you could repeat that one more time. I think the pieces that I was particularly uncertain about is the methodology that was walked through last week. It was my impression that we were going to have maybe a mini stakeholder process around that and work on that more. But it sounded like what you just said is there are the rules today, there's going to be rules after EDAM is implemented, and then at some point in time, that proposal that we heard about last week will be implemented with no changes. Is that correct, or can you clarify that just one more time?
Yeah, so if there was some mention between last week and now, some mention about potential stakeholder process, I think it was in reference to, is there a way to further transition at a later point the non-EDAM interfaces and move from the SP tie that we will now be maintaining? Is there a way to move away from that, even if someone does, even if not to an EDAM area itself? Is there a way to transition that to something like the neighboring adjacent gap area or generic gap or whatever? That could be done through additional stakeholder discussion and process. Day one, we're maintaining the SP tie. The EDAM interface, I think is consistent with what we had described last week, and we believe still has to maintain that transitional posture for day one as EDAM entities come into the system. And so we have some flexibility on the non-EDAM interfaces. We don't have that same flexibility on EDAM interfaces. It creates a fundamental problem with the design at that point.
Okay, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll repeat back. So KISO interties to non-EDAM areas going to stay the same as is today. EDAM to EDAM will obviously change because we're going to have EDAM entities. EDAM to non-EIM BAAs, that is going to maintain what George presented last week. And I guess my confusion is I thought George said is he's going to drop the G gap completely. So can you clarify?
So there's a clarification.
Yeah.
There's a clarification there. George can clarify that.
Yeah, so as we said in the previous slide, basically for non-ISO interties, we're maintaining the generation aggregation point, but we're going to use a single one per tie to have a single price, and the proposal is to use the adjacent BAA D gap for that specific intertie. And I brought the example of intertie from BPA to PAC West. Well, we'll be using the BPA D gap with that intertie combination to price intertie schedules from BPA to PAC West and vice versa.
Okay, and then that's how it's going to be a D gap. It's going to be a single price, except for, okay, what about, I know C gaps, you said there was no need for C gaps anymore. It just confused things. But are you going to use the same C gap price formation for tie gens?
Okay,
or are you going to keep tie gens the same as today?
Yeah, we'll leave the tie gens the same as today, and that was the plan even for before. But we were using the generation aggregation point as a general concept. So we were referring to the location for the TG as a custom gap because it points to the location of a specific supply resource in an EIM or non-EIM BAA. So there's no reason to bring that in and refer now to a custom gap. We'll simply say it's the location of the specific resource, supply resource in that BAA that's associated with the TG, and so that we keep the complicated concepts like generic gap and custom gap out of the discussion to maintain simplicity here. So yes, no change for TGs than how they're used today.
George, I have a question. So understand from scheduling and pricing, can we still produce a generic gap price?
Yes.
For future use if people wanted to see a history of what that price was?
Yeah, in that slide at the bottom, we say that we committed to make public all the gap tie definitions and the LMPs that we will be calculating for these locations, even if they're not going to be used in settlements, just for information purposes.
Good, thank you.
Okay, and then I have two more questions. I'll be very quick. The next question is, if you are in a non-contiguous area, do you still have to have the self-schedule into the first boundary, or are you now allowed to economically offer into the KISO intertie?
So I think we have this question from various stakeholders before and you as well. I remember specifically if you want to bid at the ISO intertie, but not from an adjacent BAA, but maybe from an EDAM BAA, which is non-adjacent. What we have said several times is that with the EDAM rollout, all these bids from outside EDAM to EDAM appear at the EDAM boundary, right? So if you are bringing the energy not from an adjacent BAA, then you either have to wheel through an adjacent BAA that is an EIM BAA, or you have to bid into an EDAM BAA and use the EDAM transfer to potentially link your schedule with ISO demand.
So is it an oversimplification to answer Carrie's question is that you can either self-schedule, or if it's a source-specific, and I'm not using the term, designated network resource in the neighboring balancing area, you can bid that according to the rules. But you can't just do a non-resource specific bid at the tie, at that neighboring tie. It has to be source specific.
Yeah, let's take an example. Let's say the source of the energy is in Idaho Power, not in EDAM yet, right? And the intent is to supply demand in the ISO Balancing Authority area. So the possibilities here is basically bring the energy through BPA, let's say, using BPA TSP to Malin. So you have a day-ahead schedule at the SP tie for Malin 500, that's the Malin 5 and 101, and then in real time you bridge your schedule from Idaho to BPA with a base transfer, let's say. And we had examples that show that. The other alternative is to bring it through Pac West. So that will be a day-ahead import from Idaho to Pac West, and this will be a soft schedule if it's a system resource, or potentially it could be a bid, an economic bid if it's a designated network resource, and then use the Pacific Corp West to ISO transfer at CRAG to link it with your ISO demand. There are some other ways that we described on very specific situations that we're using the generic gap before, where you can bid at the ISO intertie, then bite back and replace it with real time. All those are still relevant. We may not have the G-gap in place, but we can use still the SP tie, and we have an example coming up in a couple slides on how this can work out.
Okay, go ahead, Mark. Did you say something?
No, I was just taking a breather.
I think the takeaway I'm getting is that if the answer to my question is no, if you're in a not contiguous BA, you cannot, just today you can economically offer on the ties, tomorrow you can't, but all those mitigation measures that you described last week, except for the G-gap ones, still apply.
I guess I'd like to clarify one piece of that, and is that when you say non-contiguous, if you can find a non-EDAM path to the CAISO intertie, you can still do SP tie.
That's what I described with Idaho.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You just have to bridge it in real time with the BA you brought. In this case, for the example, was BPA.
Yeah, okay.
That will be the existing practice.
Yeah, yeah. Which is not different than what's done today.
Understood.
Oh, well, it is, just to clarify, it is different than today, but I understand that there are mitigating and alternative pathways to still enact the economic offer on the intertie. Okay, and then.
Sorry, it is still, when we say it's the same, it's because we're bringing in what you do in real time to conclude it, right? So in the day-ahead market, you just have an intertie bid from BPA to ISO at the SP tie, right? But in real time, if the energy is not coming from BPA, you have to bridge your schedule with BPA, and maybe with a base transfer from Idaho, right? Or, you know, so what we're saying is that this is a practice that is done today for achieving exactly the same thing, and the type is not going to change, still going through BPA using a BPA TSP. So what we're saying is that really we're not introducing any change to your scheduling activity and the practices unless your source is in an EDAM BAA, all right? Because Today, from Pacificor being non-EDAM BAA, but EIM BAA, you can be directly at the ISO intertie, and the energy is coming from Pacificor. And that is no longer the case once Pacificor becomes an EDAM BAA, because now, you have an EDAM transfer between Pacificor and ISO. So that is the only change, which is a natural change because the BAA joins EDAM. But if the source of the energy is not in an EDAM BAA, we don't see potential changes in how you're going to supply this energy to meet ISO demand.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I think I understand. I don't want to take up any more time with that example. I know you have a lot to get through, and I just have one final question related to what Mark just outlined. So before lunch, I was under the impression that we were going to have to do a bunch of tariff clarifications, and we might even remove this from the tariff. And I know John will probably talk about the tariff later, but just so we're all clear, the plan still is for the CAISO to assume you're implementing everything from last week, and all the tariff clarifications, the tariff as it is, are going to stay the same to enact that.
That portion of the tariff as applicable to the EDAM interfaces still applies. I think the language that needs to be decided whether and what needs to be added is giving us that pathway to maintain that for the non-EDAM interfaces.
That makes sense. I guess the hard part that I'm struggling with is if the full implementation after the transitional period, if that is fully being put into the tariff, or whether that's going to be continued to be worked on, and then we'll put that fully in the tariff later.
I'll give you a nuanced answer. For those later EDAM entities who transition into EDAM, the tariff is established. For the non-EDAM interfaces, we will not have a clear sunset, if you want, and that may be still open whether that transitions further through further consideration and stakeholder discussions.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Carrie. Next in the queue, we have Rohan Chatterjee. Go ahead, Rohan.
Yeah, Rohan Chatterjee from Pacificor. So the way I'm thinking about this slide is just to sort of make it really clear from my understanding. For the first bullet, is that relevant to, like Mark was saying, CAL-ISO non-EDAM entities? Is that the first bullet trying to address CAL-ISO non-EDAM entities?
Yes, the first bullet is about ISO entities, and the second bullet is for non-ISO entities.
Okay, and I'm asking that because on day one, Malin will be a transfer location between PAC West and CAL-ISO. So is the bullet basically saying that for non-EDAM BAs to CAL-ISO, Malin will still retain the SP tie methodology, but that's not to take away from the fact that Malin 500 will be a transfer location between PAC West and CAL-ISO on day one.
Yeah, Malin 500 is, you can say, an intertie that is used both for transfers and intertie schedules. So it's both a transfer location and an SP tie. So as you mentioned, it will be used for transfers between Pacificor West and ISO. That will be, and later on between Portland General and ISO with transfer rights going through BPA. But it can also be used for intertie schedules to or from the ISO and BPA, and then in real time bridging those schedules to whatever the actual BAA source or sink is.
Okay, got it. And then for the second bullet, non-CAL-ISO EDAM, EIM interties, I believe the example that was laid out earlier was BPA's interchange point with Pacific Corp West, so BPAT.PAC West.
Yes.
Could you give an example on the PAC East side? And what comes to my mind is Four Corners. How is this going to apply to, say, the Four Corners point in PAC East? Because there's multiple BAAs at Four Corners. So could you maybe help explain this concept as it relates to another point, let's say like Four Corners?
Yes, it's possible that you can have multiple BAAs that are used today for having even transfers with Pacific Corp East. What we're proposing here on the second bullet is for any intertie schedules, which we will support in HASP, as we mentioned in the workshops, between EIM BAAs and an EDAM BAA, which is PACE now, you will use the adjacent BAA DGAP for each tie. So for Four Corners, I don't have it on top of my mind, well, which is the adjacent BAA. I don't know if we can get back to you on that, but that
so
would be...
Let's, for the sake of simplicity, let's just say Arizona Public Service and Public Service Company of New Mexico.
So if the adjacent BAA DGAP is the APS DGAP, then the location of the schedule for an import from, let's take PNM, right? From an import from PNM to PACE will be the APS DGAP, and then in real time you will bridge that with the base transfer between PNM and APS. Make sense? So these are concepts
it will have to...
Yeah, what I was going to say is that what we have discussed in the workshops about the intertie scheduling options and how you bridge your schedules, and our discussion about the hour-ahead scheduling process implementation, these are not changing. These are still valid in the transitional period. The thing that changes is the location where we distribute the intertie schedule, right? That's the change. But the discussion is still there, right?
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So at Four Corners, is it going to be specific to APS, or is it going to be Four Corners APS would be one gap tie location, PNM Four Corners would be a second gap tie location, or as you presumably explained earlier, any transfers coming in from PNM to PAC East would have to go via APS, ostensibly because you're only holding the Four Corners tie to the gap location of APS. Which one is it?
Yeah, I think you're asking a question I think we need to take back a little bit further, because there's some common connectivity at Four Corners that we need to work through and be sure that we answer this carefully in light of that. So I want to, if you want to write that up as a question, we can write that back, but I don't want to answer that with a specific answer until we clarify the multiple connectivities that are available at Four Corners.
Understood. Yep, we can do that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rohan. Next in the queue, we have a question from Don Trethewey. Go ahead, Don.
Hi, Don Trethewey from GDS Associates. The previous question actually got to my main point, but do we believe that there's a need for the non-CAISO EDAM EIM entity interties that requires a tariff change, or is that just because the original design was you had to support multiple gaps ties at each intertie? Does that require a tariff change?
Hey, Don, John Andrews. So I'll have a slide a little bit later on tariff process, but the tariff team, we're playing a little bit of catch up here. So we're following along as all the stakeholders, and we will be facilitating a call on December 3rd concerning the tariff clarifications, and we'll do our best to wrap in what additional changes might be associated with its transitional approach. And then we will then be working to develop the further iteration of that draft tariff and publishing it prior to any board consideration of all of this at the December, 16 to 18, WEM governing body and board meetings.
Thanks, John. That answered my question.
All right. Good. Thanks.
Thanks, Don. Next in the queue, we have Kathleen Colbert. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Hi, great. Kathleen Colbert from Vistra. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No, I appreciate this. I also really appreciate that these are recorded because I have to be honest, I'm going to have to listen to them several times. As I'm listening to the conversation, I did raise my hand to just to throw out there that I've heard a couple times things said like, this is how we're doing it today in real time, or this is the current practice. And while I thought I understood at like a high level what the practice was today, what I'm hearing isn't totally jiving with that. And I'm wondering if you guys could provide some advice or emails off like after this call with direction towards if they're like, is the EIM training, like computer-based module, is that a good place for us to go to for refreshers? Is there an intertie one? I just can't remember off the top of my head. Is that where I should go? Or even is there a recent training maybe that you've done that kind of gets at how the scheduling flows from out of the day ahead awards? Like we have a whole process of accepting or declining the tags that flows into HAS, that flows into FMM, like just a very high level basics for everyone so that we could get more rooted in the technical element of how the scheduling is done today, which would help me and I hope others follow this a bit more closely. Because I mean, even the word bridging, you keep saying bridging, but I don't remember that word from like the manuals or from a training. So I would really appreciate some extra help.
Okay, Kathleen, this is Joanne. So we do have some material regarding how the WEIM functionality works, and we can point you to that and provide those resources to this audience.
That would be great. Thank you, Joanne.
What we could do is, at the end of this session, I'm going to talk about an FAQ document that we've putting together. We're continuing to add some of these questions that are coming up to that document. We'll also put those resources in that document. I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, that would be great. I really do appreciate it.
Yep.
And I feel like Carrie said this on an earlier call about, recognizing how much you guys live in these details. And so it feels very fresh and might feel like we should maybe be following better. And so I appreciate your patience with giving that background and giving us a chance to get reoriented and caught up as a stakeholder community.
Certainly. I know it's a lot of information. We're happy to help with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Next in the queue, we have a question from Zach Gill-Sanford. Go ahead, Zach.
Hi, Zach Gill-Sanford with Utelecast for Pacific Core Transmission. Just wanted to add a little bit of clarity maybe on the question that was just asked for Vistra, that perhaps some of the confusion is around roles, that today what happens in real time in EIM and the bridging, as Kaisa's terming it, that is actually performed by the EIM entities, the transmission functions of the various EIM participants, not the associated marketers, or certainly not the MRTU participants. So that's happening almost sort of behind the scenes, maybe from a participant perspective, that the e-tags that MRTU schedules submit, or schedulers submit, then basically get mapped or associated to EIM interchange resource IDs in real time. I would kind of tack onto that, maybe just a clarifying question. So the CAISO, back to kind of the phrase as it is today, is it CAISO's expectation that that existing bridging functionality can persist, meaning that MRTU participants would take no action for this non-EDAM style interchange in real time, and rather the existing EIM process, sorry for all the acronyms, using RTSI that map those to EIM interchange resource IDs, that would continue on the entity side? Thanks.
Zach, you're correct. We don't have any expectation to change the role of the EIM entity in managing base transfers and import-export schedules for their BAA. The general concept of the bridging, the way we're using here, is that essentially a day-ahead schedule will be bridged to the actual source of the sink where the energy is actually produced or consumed, which may not be the adjacent BAA, but further out. And that's why in our examples, we're using base transfers and maybe imports from a non-EIM BAA to an EIM BAA, but you're absolutely correct. This activity today is managed by the EIM entity, and we don't expect any changes to that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I hope that helps clarify that for MRTU participants, you're probably mostly unaware of that activity that's happening real time through EIM BAAs today. If anything, you'd see it on your resultant settlement statements with those particular bridging EIM entities, as they would then assign sort of those bridged resource IDs, any imbalance settlement if there's changes after the base schedule deadline in real time. But otherwise, probably little to no awareness or activity on your end today. Thanks.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, that actually is helpful, Zach, and I guess I just want to point out that as a result of that, prior training material, including EIM training material, may not highlight that piece because it's happening. Yeah. So be aware of that, or as we continue to evolve our training material, make it clear that there's some activity that's not their activity, but the EIM entity activity.
Any more questions before we on this topic before we transition to NRA implications as a result of this, resource adequacy implications for the CAISO BA resource adequacy?
Looks like we just received a follow-up question from Rohan. Go ahead, Rohan.
Yeah, hey, regarding transfers from non-CAISO EDAM to non-EIM entities, is there a bullet that is going to address that as well? Or if it has already been covered, would you mind repeating that one more time, please? I just want to make sure I understood that paradigm as well.
Like, for example, from Idaho being an EIM BAA to Pacific Northwest being an EDAM BAA, is this what you're thinking?
I was thinking more on the lines of DJ and Wacom, but sure, we can use Idaho. And, well, Idaho actually would not work because that would be EIM to EDAM, but I'm specifically thinking about non-EIM to EDAM. So with that construct, more on the lines of DJ and Wacom. Oh, tomorrow, well, it will be SPP, but today, as it stands, it's PACE and Wacom.
Non-EIM to EDAM, like, for example, from Senasi to ISO or from Mead-C to Backwest?
We'll use his example. Use Wacom to Pacific Core East. Pacific Core East is in EDAM. Wacom is not in EDAM.
Right.
Okay, not in EIM.
Not in EIM. Yes, okay, so this is intertie scheduling activity between these BAAs. So it's an import to... Power off. Sorry? Yeah, so it's, we're talking about an intertie schedule that is either an import into Pacific Northeast or an export from Pacific Northeast, and the source for the import or the sink for the export is a non-EIM BAA, correct?
Correct.
So this can participate today in EIM, and there's no change going to EDAM. Everything stays the same. The only thing that we're proposing here in the EDAM transition plan, the EDAM transitional period, is that we'll use a single gap tie for these transactions, for all transactions on a given intertie. So for the intertie at base, where this schedule will be tagged, we'll use the adjacent BAA D-gap to distribute the schedule and calculate the price for that intertie, for all intertie transactions at that same place.
Okay, so in that example that I just gave, which is the DJ interchange point between Wacom and Pac East, it sounds like that will have the gap of Wacom and the tie of Dave Johnson?
I believe so. I don't have the network model in front of my eyes right now, but the way you're describing it, yes.
Okay, and that seems similar to the earlier conversation that we were having about Four Corners and an EIMBA, like Arizona Public Service, where I think I also heard that the same concept would be applicable, where it would be the AZPS gap held to the Four Corners tie. So the EIM-EDAM transfer gap type pricing and the non-EIM-EDAM transfer using the same gap type pricing seems to be a common thread between the two paradigms.
Yeah, this is Mark again. I think there's some common threads, but I refer back to my earlier statement that Four Corners does have some additional complexity because of multiple parties can
Yes.
get to and from Four Corners, and I'd like to answer that separately in that context.
Yep, okay, got it.
Thank you, Rohan. It looks like we have one more hand raised before we continue the discussion. We have Robert Fisher. Go ahead, Robert.
Hi, this is Robert Fisher with NV Energy. Can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. I have two questions. I'll start with the first one. This is kind of partly from the last meeting and a little bit on what you have on here. In real time, for Nevada, if we were to have multiple scheduling priorities, say, you know, we have a wheel through that's going to Nevada, and then we purchased energy that passed through RUC, and maybe another schedule that didn't pass through RUC. Is the expectation that those are going to show up in real time as a single mirror? And will that single mirror be cleared in HASP?
Robert, I need a little bit more specificity on this question. Are you referring to imports, let's say, in Nevada Energy at the same intertie from the same BAA?
They would be from, so for the example that I'm thinking of right now, would be from California. One of yes, one would be a wheel through from, I don't know, say somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. One would be a purchase from CAISO that cleared in RUC, and then the third one would be a purchase that did not clear RUC but did clear IFN. So those, each three of those have three different priorities. And if you kind of see what I'm saying, I'm a little concerned if you're grouping all of those together into a single mirror, how am I going to get those priorities passed through? And so that's where my confusion is.
Right, so these priorities you're referring to, they're relevant when we run the day-ahead market. The mirroring becomes relevant after the day-ahead market, where we mirror the final day-ahead schedules into the MBAA, in this case Nevada Energy. At that point, you already have the day-ahead schedules clear the day-ahead market based on whatever priority they had from the day-ahead market. So what is your concern?
My concern is in real time, George. So when we go into HASP, currently each one of those three has a different priority. If you group them into a single mirror, those three priorities are now gone. So you would prioritize the wheel at the same level as an export that didn't that got cut in Ruck. And that's concerning to me because you may take the whole chunk rather than a little piece.
Well, I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah, the fact that, let's say that we're using a single mirror system resource to mirror all the schedules, that doesn't mean that all the schedules now, they assume the same priority because they have as the same base schedule at the mirror system resource. If they're cut in real time, for some reason, based on their priority that they have in real time, the mirror schedule simply adjusts to that. It's not that they're going to get the same schedule priority in real time.
So let me
they're mirrored at the same resource.
And it looks like James Lynn has his hand
Yes.
raised. James, did you want to touch on that as
Wait,
well?
before James starts, let me just, I think I see what George is saying. I just want to say it in different terms. So you're
I was just
saying
going to ask you a question,
it still
that's all.
maintains the priority,
Hold on.
right?
Let Robert finish, and then James, hold off till Robert finishes.
Yeah. So George, what you're saying is in HASP, those individual schedules still clear based upon their individual priorities. There's no grouping of the mirror in HASP.
No, that's not what I'm saying. James.
George,
I'm trying to say, yeah, go ahead.
Hold on, George. So I think your concern is you got to look at the BAAs. On the ISO side, when it clears HASP, the ISO side, you will still retain all of those priorities. On the mirror, which is on the EIM BAA side, they are going to be linked or grouped into a single mirror resource and not have adjacent priorities. But if the ISO is doing the curtailment, we will do the curtailment based upon our priorities that are coming out of HASP.
Okay, that's kind of what I was trying to say, James. Thank you for clarifying.
And just
go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was going to try to maybe clear things up, but I'm afraid to. So the mirroring is to avoid double counting, not to manage the schedules themselves.
Correct.
Okay.
The mirroring is our mechanism to keep the EIM BAA balanced because whatever is imported to the ISO or exported from the ISO without BAA needs to be shown coming out or going in, and the mirror system resource is the mechanism to show that, to keep that EIM BAA balanced. So it's not used for priority enforcement. It's simply an artifact of the fact that we are representing the schedules properly for balancing the BAAs.
And therefore, the schedules themselves are still there and represent and maintain their respective priorities.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it brings up another question, but I'll go to my second one. I'm reading this, the LMP calculation, and I'm a little confused here. You say that the adjacent BA DGAP price. So as I understand it, the DGAP price is the aggregation of the supply resources for calculating that price, right?
We will collapse all the potential prices for a given intertie to a single price. So we're looking to have one gap tie for a non-ISO interties to calculate the price, and we're proposing that to be the adjacent BAA for that intertie.
Adjacent BAA price. So it's like the MET price or the DGAP price?
That's the DGAP tie price. So remember in our workshops we said you can have multiple gaps associated with the same tie. That would lead to multiple gap tie prices for the same tie. Well, if we select now only the adjacent BAA DGAP as the DGAP tie price to settle all the intertie schedules on that tie, now we have a single price. That's the motivation, at least the way we think about for the transitional period, to have parity with what we're doing for the ISO interties, where there's also going to be a single price for all intertie schedules at an ISO scheduling point.
So my confusion is coming around if you were to start setting prices on that tie, and I'll just use that term for now, even though it's incorrect, based upon scheduling priorities, how would that look in regards to that DGAP pricing? I think an example of this would be great. I mean, you can explain it now, but I'm not sure without a picture I'm going to quite get it, because to me, the intertie can set its own individual price and set its shadow price without affecting the system DGAP price. And these two things are really throwing my thought process off. And I would really appreciate some clarifications in regards to how that is supposed to look, specifically when you're creating scheduling priorities. You know, that you can look at it as the bid stack that's associated with that tie, but I'm concerned, if you can't tell, around the scheduling priorities.
Yeah, so for a given DGAP tie price, the way we explained it in the paper and the workshop, you have several components to that LMP. We explain for each LMP component where it's coming from. And it doesn't matter what kind of intertie schedules you have there. If you have self-schedules, for example, with some scheduling priority, if you have bids in case of DNRs, right? The price has the marginal energy cost of the BAA where the energy is imported to or exported from. In your examples, that will be the NVE, right? And then you have also, you know, your marginal loss and your marginal congestion component from the location that we use to distribute the schedule. That will be the adjacent BAA DGAP, right? And if there is an intertie scheduling limit on that intertie managed by, in this case, NVE, then the shadow price of that intertie scheduling limit, if it's binding, it will also find its way in the marginal congestion component of the LMP. Right? We explained that, and we have, you know, written down specifically how these components are calculated. Does this help?
I'll go with yes for now. I'll do some more research. Thanks for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Robert. Next, we have one more hand raised, but before that, I'll read a question we received in the chat from Nadia Krantz. She had a clarifying question asking, does the adjacent DGAPs, the adjacent DGAPs are used for both import and export relative to EDAM BAA only?
Yes, they're used for both imports and exports on that intertie.
Thank you. And now we have one final hand raised from Kathleen Colbert. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Sorry, double muted. Kathleen Colbert from Vistra. Okay, so that conversation I did spur one more clarifying question, and yes, I know we had this presentation, and I know you have a white paper. But the way I walked away from those conversations last week, was for the DGAP. Frankly, I understood that the pricing approach was the same as our AP node approach, an aggregated price node, because when you defined it, you said it was all of the supply resource nodes within that BAA, at least on the gap side, the gap side of the gap tie pricing, and then you were modeling additional congestion to the intertie that it was mapped to. Did I not understand that right?
No, I think, Kathleen, you have it right on. When we explained where the various components come from, we said that some components come from the BAA that's receiving the energy as an import or exporting based on the transaction. Some components come from the gap, marginal loss and physical congestion component, the way you described, and some components, you also described that, come from the intertie, and this is the intertie scheduling limit if it's binding.
Okay, great. No, thanks for doing that one more time. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. We received one more question in the chat from Kevin Porras, asking to clarify one last time, the LMP at the interties will always be the DGAP of the adjacent area and the tie combination for both import and export directions. Is this interpretation correct?
Correct. For non-ISO interties, for ISO interties will be the ESP tie price, which has similar principles, but it's a single location in most cases, whereas the gap is a wide aggregation.
Thank you. Taking a final look, Not seeing any other hands raised or any more questions in the chat, so I think with that we can continue the discussion.
Yeah, so in this next section, George is going to walk us effectively through an application, what we just talked about, to resource adequacy imports to the California ISO.
Oh, thank you, Milos. All right, so for the transitional period, okay, we described all these RA import rules in the workshops. Now, we're going to simplify all this for the transitional period. So we will maintain the ISO SP ties, which are used today for RA monthly sewing. So since we're realizing that there's no need to use the generic gap concept anymore because we're having a single price at a tie, at an ISO tie, we'll use that SP tie for the RA monthly sewing for market participants that they have secure make at that intertie, and that is the same process used today, so there's no change from today. Regarding to the RA obligation reassignment that we talked about in the workshop, the element of the reassignment pertaining to the day-ahead market where the participant will reassign from the SP tie resource to EDAM resources is still relevant before 9 a.m. And this is specific for the two locations that now become EDAM interties with the ISO, CRAG, which is an intertie from Pacific Northwest to the ISO, and MDWP, which is an intertie between Pacific Northeast and the ISO. So we explained that these SP ties will be maintained for transfers, of course, for CRR locations and for RA monthly sewing because the participants may have secured MIC at these locations. However, these are not locations that support intertie scheduling because any exchange of energy on these interties will be taking place now with transfers, and we have the caveat for the MONA to ISO transfer that we're working on it. So the participant that does RA sewing on these specific locations, the resource that they're using to do the RA sewing cannot be bid in the day-ahead market, and of course also in the EIM. So they must reassign their RA obligation now to the EDAM resources, either in Pacific Northwest for the CRAG case or Pacific Northeast for the MDWP case. Otherwise, obviously, they won't be able to bid the RA obligation. They will be having a RAM assessment. So with the exception of this day-ahead reassignment process that pertains to this particular two locations at day one of EDAM rollout, we don't see the need in the transitional period, at least, to have a reassignment in real time to EIM BAA resources. So the participants can simply use their system resources or the TGs at the SP tie with an EIM BAA and bid them in the day-ahead market, same as today. And we have explained that for EIM BAA, we have bids at the intertie with an EDAM BAA like I saw that we use in the hour-ahead scheduling process, and then the schedules stay fixed, at least not optimized in FMM and RTD. When it comes to non-EIM balancing authority areas, again, we're describing in general here with the ISO, the same thing as today, no change in both cases. In this case, actually, the system resource or the TG from a non-EIM BAA can participate in both HASP and IFM, and also RTD for the case of the TG if it's 5-minute dispatchable. So basically, we're coming down to a simple solution where we're not modifying the RA monthly sewing. We're not requiring real-time reassignment, so everything stays the same as today, with the only exception for RA provision at CRAG and MDWP, where the participant can use this location to show its RA, but then it has to reassign the obligation to the EDAM resource or resources in this BA, in the Pacific or BAAs that will be providing the energy to meet an array obligation. Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions.
I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this moment. Double checking the chat. Looks like we just received a few hands raised. First, we'll go to Carrie Bentley. Go ahead, Carrie.
I'll let the other callers go first since I already talked a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. We'll come back to you. Next, we'll go to Tong Wu. Go ahead, Tong. Tong, you might be double muted. Oh, there we go. We can hear you now.
Yeah, I have a question about the first one, RE monthly showing at CISO as P-type, and the second sub-bullet under the second bullet, no reassignment for source in EIM BAA. And my specific question is if I make a purchase of firm energy from BPA, BPA is EIM BAA, and then I schedule it to mail in to the ISO. Which one would apply? The first one showing at CISO SP type same as today, that's it, or I have to do, bid RA obligation.
Yeah, so for this specific scenario where the source of the energy is in BPA, which is in the IMBAA, you will show the array, let's say at Malin 500, for example, where you have MIC, and then that system resource, the same system resource, or TG, if it is a flexible array.
Not a TG, just system resource.
Okay, system resource, generic array, then you can use this resource to bid in the day-ahead market, and you can use the same resource to bid in the hour-ahead scheduling process to meet your array obligation. There is no need to reassign anywhere.
Okay. SR must bid RA obligation. Bid RA obligation.
Yeah,
It's
let's
just,
say that. Go ahead. I need to understand what you're saying, Tom. What's your question?
My question is, say day ahead, say I schedule 10 megawatt at the Malin. I don't intend to change that. And is that it, or I need to do something again in EIM?
I'm assuming 10 megawatts is your array obligation in this example?
Yeah.
All right. So according to the tariff, if the resource does not clear the day-ahead market, you have fulfilled your array obligation. You don't have to do anything in real time. If the resource clears the day-ahead market, either partially or wholly, you need to maintain your array obligation going to real time. If it cleared the whole 10 megawatts in the day-ahead market, you can let that stay. As you know, Cyber will put a soft schedule in place if you don't submit a real-time bid at 10 megawatts, your day-ahead schedule, so you're done. If it cleared partially, let's say it cleared only 6 megawatts, I'm giving you all the scenarios here. You're still in for 10 megawatts of array obligation, so you need to perhaps put a soft schedule at the 6 megawatts, which is your day-ahead schedule, but still you need to bid the additional 4 megawatts for meeting your entire array obligation in HASP. Make sense? But
yeah,
no reassign.
Thank you.
This is the same resource that you would be using today to do exactly the same transaction. So we're not adding any additional requirements.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
Looks like we have one more hand raised from Mohan Nirula. Go ahead, Mohan. We'll try muting you one more time, Mohan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, Mohan Nirola with CDWR. So I have a follow-up question on the same topic which was being discussed. So in this case, for the EIMBA only, that is not EDAM currently, we have non-resource specific import for RA, and we use intertie resource at CAISO. So I think it's going to be SR, which is indicated here. And can we use the same resource ID today and going forward during the EDAM transitional period as well?
Yes, if the system resource is on a non-EDAM intertie. So any other intertie with the ISO except CRAG and MDWP, the answer is yes. You could use the same resource all the way through.
Okay. So because in the paper it is said that SR has to be registered, and it seems like it is something new we need to start with. But if we, already there is a intertie resource identified and has a resource ID today, can we use without registration, continue?
You're using a system resource that must be registered in the master file, same as today. So I'm assuming you already have a system resource. You're doing this today at the providing array at the ISO, or if you don't, and it's a new business, you register a resource at the intertie that you have secured MIC. That's very important. And then you can use the same system resource to show your array and then to bid in the day-ahead market, and if necessary, supplement your scheduling activity in real time.
Okay.
So
okay.
the same resource load.
Right. So there is no reassignment requirement, so we can use both. Okay. Yeah, I may have a question.
The only reassignment that we flag out here will be required before the day-ahead market for these two locations that become EDAM interties, CRAG and MDWP, if we have any array activity at these locations, or now or in the future.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mohan. Next, we have a hand raised from Dan Williams. Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, Dan from TEA. So try to make this simple. I think I know the answer to it, but just want to confirm for the group. Let's say I have a non-resource specific RA obligation at Mona to CAISO. I purchase a mid-C on-peak firm energy WSPP Schedule C strip prior to the integrated forward market, and I have transmission rights to Mona that go through the Pacific Core East BA.
Right.
I expect that the answer is that I would have to self-schedule at, let's say I find out that the resource is in Idaho's BA that I bought because I just bought generic mid-C, not mid-C as a specific generator, that I would have to self-schedule into the PACE BA to meet that RA obligation at Mona? Or is there an opportunity to economically bid at Mona as long as I meet all the other RA rules?
So there is no economic bid at Mona when Pacific or Peace becomes an EDAM BAA. However, you can still register a system resource at MDWP to show your array obligation. I'm assuming you have secured MIC at that ISO scheduling point, and then you can reassign the obligation from that system resource to the import resource from Mid-C or Idaho to PACE, because that's an EDAM resource, and you can use that system resource to bid into the real time and in the day-ahead market to meet your array obligation.
And that would be if I knew the generator far enough in advance, then I could register that as a, I'm trying to use the right terms here, as a system, an intertie resource that's a system resource, so that I could economically bid it?
No. Okay, so if it's an import system resource, it cannot bid economically at the Pacific or intertie. It can only self-schedule, which you can still use to meet your generic array obligation, by the way. If you're interested in economically participating, right, or let's say it's a flexible array, then you need to use the designated network resource that we model as a TG at that Pacific Corp intertie with Idaho to actually submit an economic bid for it. Okay?
So that, yes, that last point was, does an RA obligation into CAISO allow me to establish a tie-gen relationship with the Pacific Core BA, even if I'm just wheeling through the Pacific Core BA?
I think this is a question that maybe we need to, or you need to actually ask for feedback from the Pacific Corp entity, because you'll be using supposedly transmission rights that you acquire from Pacific Corp East. That was my assumption. I think you mentioned that too, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through ways that entities could kind of maintain some relationships. Obviously, that wouldn't work for, a purchase of unspecified generation, an hour or two before the day ahead market close, but it could be a way for entities that are outside of the EDAM footprint, but wheeling through an EDAM area to be able to maintain the economics of their contracts by going through a couple more steps. But I'll add that to my list of things to write up a example on, and so we can look at it closer.
Yeah, just one element there. If you're using a designated network resource, that is resource specific. So the TG model is a resource specific import into Pacific Corp East. It's not some unspecified energy. I just want to make sure that we're meeting the tariff requirements for designated network resource. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll write that one up. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dan. And taking a final look, it looks like we don't have any other questions in the queue, so we can go ahead and continue the discussion.
Thank you. So what I said earlier, that the intertie scheduling scenarios that we presented in the workshops are still all there. They're all relevant in the EDAM transitional period, the way that you can route your schedule and your tax in real time, bridging your schedules with the source or for an import or the sync of an export if it is in another BAA and has to wheel through another BAA. All these direct and indirect scheduling scenarios are in place. The only thing that changes in the transitional period is really the location where we distribute or mirror review is the schedule, which instead of being some generation aggregation point that we were using specifically for all BAAs, including the ISO, in the case of the ISO balancing authority area, now that will be an existing SPTI location. We had presented specific examples of how a participant that has rights on an EDAM transfer, they can actually bid directly at the ISO intertie. We had this example that was generic. So for practical purposes here, we're using the exact BAAs to match a specific scenario. So we're talking about EDAM transfer from Portland General to ISO when Portland General joins EDAM, and that transfer is on COI. It's wheeled through BPA, through John Day, and in this example, we're showing how a transmission customer for Portland General that has transmission rights on that EDAM transfer, how they can use those to bridge a schedule from the day-ahead market where they can bid directly into an ISO intertie. We had questions like that. How can I bid directly to the ISO and not have to go through either BPA or PGE? I think this is the example that we showed you at some point. We were using the concept of the generic gap in the example that we presented, and now, essentially, we're not going to be using the generic gap anymore because we have a single price on the SPTI at the ISO. We're using the existing SPTI, which is the Malin 5 and 101. and Malin 500 intertie. So nothing else is changing, as I mentioned earlier. All our scenarios are still playing out the same way. It's just that the location is more specific rather than the gap that we're using generically before. So the same scenario plays like this. You have an intertie schedule with the ISO balancing authority area. Let's say it's coming at the SP tie, right? And if nothing else happens, if that schedule stays in place, we will turn around in real time and mirror it into BPA, which will be okay if the participant actually brings energy from BPA and they want to use a BPA TSP to get to the ISO. In this example, however, this participant wants to use their EDAM transfer rights from PGE to ISO. So what they can do, and it's very similar to what we presented in the workshop with the GCAP. There we said, okay, you bid from the GCAP and then you buy it in real time and you replace it with your actual schedule. Same thing happens here. You bid at the SP tie now, right? And then after the day-ahead market, you buy it back. That's why I have this X there at this import resource. Once you buy it back, of course, we're not going to mirror it now. It's not there anymore. Instead of that schedule, now you replace it with a HASP schedule from BPA to PGE. That's the import resource at PGE. We show it with purple. This is a HASP schedule. You can do that in HASP based on our HASP implementation changes that I will repeat here that stay put for the EDAM transitional period. And then you bridge that schedule, of course, with a base schedule for your generating resource in BPA where the energy is coming from, or if it's coming from another BA, you bridge it with a base transfer from another EIM BAA or with a base schedule import into BPA that matches the day-ahead schedule that cleared the day-ahead market, which you're buying back. And then you link that with your transmission rights on the EDAM transfer from PGE to ISO by submitting a soft schedule for your type 1 TSR, even in real time, we support that. That matches your day-ahead schedule that you're buying back. So now you can see in the figure how you can essentially route the energy from wherever it comes into BPA to PGE and to ISO using the EDAM transfer, although you're still having the ability this way to bid directly into the ISO at the SP tie and then buying it back. So same scenario, the way we presented it, we just wanted to give you the opportunity here to make a point that all the discussion we had in the workshops, all these intertie scheduling scenarios, including this very specific scenario, they're all playing out the same way in the EDAM transitional period, as long as you keep in mind that we don't have GCAPs and we're using the ISO SP tie in its case as a replacement of the concept. So I'm going to stop here. This was my last slide. I realize this is a very specific scenario, but through it, I wanted to make a point that all the time that we spend in the workshops is not wasted. It's still very relevant. And you can do exactly the same thing like what we described.
Thanks, George. Before we take the next hand raise, we did have a clarifying question that we received for the previous slide from Kevin at SCE, saying, at Mona for reassignment from an EDAM resource before EDAM 9 a.m., does EDAM resource need to be at a specific resource level, or can it be at the pool power, example BPA power, or DGAP BA level?
No, it has to be an EDAM resource that participates in EDAM at its location. Now, it could be a single resource, it could be multiple resources. It doesn't matter as long as you make the reassignment and you say, for example, that my 100 megawatt array obligation is coming from these 3 EDAM resources in Pacific Northwest and Pacific Northeast, whatever the case is, to the tune of 20 megawatts, 30 megawatts, and 50 megawatts. That is fine.
Or an import.
Or an import into PACE. Also, it's an EDAM resource at this point.
Thank you. And next, we have a question from Rohan Chatterjee. Go ahead, Rohan.
Yeah. Hey, George. I think this was covered in the workshop last week, but I just wanted to sort of ask this one more time, just so I understand it. What is call it the lilac or the purple dotted dashed line between the intertie resource and the blue TSR circle at the interfaces of PGE circle? What is that dotted dashed blue or purple or lilac line accomplishing?
Yeah. Yeah, this is what we refer by bridging. Essentially what this means is that you will set up your schedules to match something that is your intent. In this case, you're buying back, let's say, your import schedule at the Malin SPTI, right? Let's say it was 100 megawatts that clear in the day ahead. All right, so now you're going to put the self-scheduled import into PGE from BPA. That's 100 megawatts because you're replacing your 100 megawatt import from BPA now with something that comes through PGE to use your EDAM transfer. And bridging it to the TSR type 1 means that you will also submit a 100 megawatt self-schedule for the two TSRs, type 1 TSRs that you have rights going from PGE to ISO. So the dash dot double arrow conveys the idea of bridging, meaning I'm going to have the same schedule on the other side to connect. So you're going to connect the 100 megawatt import into PGE with a 100 megawatt transfer from PGE to ISO to bring it to ISO.
Got it. That's extremely helpful. And somewhat based on that earlier comment or clarification that Zach had made, that functionality of bridging, as is the intent of that dotted dash line, that would be carried out by the EIM entity, correct?
Not in this case. So Zach was referring to activity in an EIM BAA. So, for example, the BPA entity will submit the base schedule for the mirror system resource, right? But on the other side, we have EDAM entities. PGE now is an EDAM entity, so PGE will not manage this import schedule into PGE, will be the scheduling coordinator. I'm assuming the same scheduling coordinator that bid the day ahead import into ISO, they will have to bid into PGE now. PGE is an EDAM entity, so there is participation of the interties from scheduling coordinators. And in the case of a type 1 TSR, it's also the same scheduling coordinator that will be submitting the self-schedule for the rights, exercising the rights. So there's a difference going from EIM to EDAM, right? In EIM, the EIM entity has control of these functions, namely mirroring, base transfers, and import-export schedules at their boundary. But when you go to EDAM, okay, import-exports at the EDAM entity are represented by scheduling coordinators, not the EDAM entity. And any exercise of rights through type 1 TSR or release of rights through a type 2 TSR is also a transmission customer scheduling coordinator. The EDAM entity is responsible for type 3 and type 4 TSRs, and of course the EIM transfers that are shown here in red. So there's a slight separation of responsibility when you go to the EDAM world.
Joe, just caveat, this slide is only applicable when PGE joins the EDAM.
Yes, I did mention
not
that.
Before that.
Yeah, in this slide, PGE is an EDAM entity in this example.
Yeah, that's very important to distinguish, because this is not like for day one, May 1st. This is when Portland General joins EDAM, and then this is how what George was going through.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay, that's very helpful. So the solid bidirectional arrows, both purple and blue, will be the responsibility of the SC, whereas and it will also be the responsibility of the SC to bridge the intertie resource and the TSR as is represented by that purple dash dot line. However, the red dash dot line, that functionality would be accomplished by the BPA EIM entity.
For generating resources, there is also another caveat I wanted to mention here. So let's say the source is this generating resource in BPA, and as I mentioned, it could come from further out, we just bridge it to BPA. But let's say this example is showing a generating resource in BPA providing the energy that eventually finds its way to the ISO through the import into BPA and the transfer, right? That generating resource, if it is a non-participating resource, remember in EIM, we still have a distinction between EIM participating and non-participating resources. When you join EDAM, that distinction goes away and every resource is participating. So if it is a non-participating EIM resource, its base schedule is also the responsibility of the entity. If it is a participating resource, there can be actually a base schedule coordinator that could submit the base schedule for that resource in BSAP. So there is another separation potentially between the roles of the EIM entity and the scheduling coordinator.
The current practice in WEAM.
Yes, but yeah, we're not changing these roles for EIM entities, by the way. Yeah.
Right. And then I think the overarching concept that you were trying to relay over here was moving away from the G gaps, as was discussed during last week's workshop, to this particular slide. I just refreshing my memory from the last week workshop, the G gaps were not an acceptable form of submission in real time. So what I had remembered from that workshop was those would automatically be zeroed out by cyber. Whereas I think what you are trying to relay over here is that these red crosses in these two circles that are shown with CISO and BPAT, that zeroing out of the day-ahead MSR to intertie resource schedule, that would have to be done by the SC. That wouldn't be done automatically by cyber.
That's right. Correct. You're right on. Yes, that's very good observation. Thank you for bringing this up. Correct. The GGAP concept, we had some process where you automatically buy back your schedule to facilitate, but here we don't know if this is a real schedule that will stay and will mirror it, or a schedule that you will buy back because you want to do this, so the SC has to do it. There is no way for us to find out.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. Looks like we have one final hand raised from Kathleen Colbert. Before we continue, go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, thanks. Kathleen from Vistra. Question, and it's just under the hypothetical future world in which, some EIM entities could, EIM is voluntary, so you can provide like a notice to exit, right? So let's say, just so I understand, because it sounds like the scheduling is contingent upon, at least this example says BPA is an EIM entity. So in a world where they exit from EIM, if they, completely hypothetical, George, just kind of want to understand, does that mean this changes? Does it stay the same? I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a good question, Kathleen, actually. Yeah, what happens if BPA is not an EIM entity in the future? So fundamentally, it will not change. Some details will change. For example, we don't mirror day-ahead schedules into a non-EIM entity, so you can remove the red MSR, all right? Okay. And then you can also remove the purple MSR, so there's no mirroring of schedules with a non-EIM BAA, but everything else is staying the same. You can still have an SPTI import at Malin 500 from BPA being non-EIM BAA, and then buying it back in real time and putting an import from that BPA non-EIM entity into PGE, right? And then tying it to your transfer rights from PGE to ISO. So the concept is still the same, it's just you won't have the mirroring in place, okay?
Okay, great, thank you. I'll think about it more, appreciate it.
And maybe also another, Kathleen, this is the, under the assumption that we're staying with the SPTI concept. So subject to where we reach with the stakeholder on the final solution, things may change, right, for the
Post day one.
Post day one. But this is what we're envisioning for when Pacific Corp goes live, as well as when Portland General goes live.
Thanks, Kathleen. Taking a final look, not seeing any other hands raised and no further questions in the chat, so I think we can continue on in the discussion.
Yeah, so in this next section, we're going to turn it over to James Lynn to walk us through the congestion revenue rights implications as a result of staying with the current design and SPTI modeling on the CAISO interties, but also touching on the couple of base and PAC West interties, Craig, you and Mona, and that treatment for CRR purposes. So take us away, James.
Thank you, Milos. I'm going to first apologize. My camera's not working, so that's why I'm not on camera. But this is a carryover from our meeting earlier this week regarding the congestion revenue annual and monthly auctions that Jeremy presented. So we're going to build off of that. So like we said back then, the CR model is going to continue to support CISO intertie scheduling points for CRR bidding through the transitional period. Now, this transitional period, as we indicated, is at least going to include 2026. Now, it also includes those intertie scheduling points that are transitioning from an external intertie, ISO intertie, to an internal EDAM intertie. Now, I'm going to stay away from the MONA discussion because of all of the topic or discussion points earlier, but this is specifically will apply to Craig when PAC goes live in May 1st. For the transitional period, the CR model is going to use, this model that's above, which is using the SPTI, is what we're going to be using for the CRR annual and the subsequent monthly allocation and auction markets during this entire transition period, the same as we do today. So you'll be able to come in and you'll be in the CRR model, you'll be able to put your bids on the scheduling points that are defined as they are today. So for Craig View, you'll be able to put your CRR bids on Craig View. If Mona becomes a completely an internal intertie, you can put it on Mona. Now, as we also indicated earlier this week, is we did post an SP tie to adjacent DGAP tie mapping. This mapping is informational only at this point. We are going to be using this during our considerations of the post-transitional period and how we are going to potentially align the CRR model with the overall market model, whether or not we're doing a direct, the adjacent BAA, or if we go and expand it further and be able to use any DGAP tie combination. If we can go to the next slide. So what does this mean for congestion revenue rights and their settlement? So for CR1B, this settlement is going to align with how we described it in the congestion revenue allocation initiative. The CR1B is only going to apply to ISO constraints. We are not going to be providing a congestion revenue hedge for EDAM constraints at this point. That'll be addressed in subsequent initiatives. The CR notional value on the ISO constraints are going to be calculated the same way as today. So I'm going to look at your CRR. If I see you are at Malin, we are going to use the Malin distribution to the constraints as we do today. Now, you're going to have the association to the ITC ISL, plus you are going to have distribution to all ISO constraints based upon the shift factors as defined by the model. So if that CR has effectiveness on a specific constraint, you'll get notional value calculated there. As also described in the CR revenue allocation, we will be calculating CR flows similar as we do today. We are only going to calculate in ISO constraints. It is going to be based on EDAM area energy and imbalance reserve schedules that clear the market that have an effectiveness on those constraints. So we will still calculate the CR flow as we described in that initiative. And as we described in that initiative, we are going to continue to exclude ETC schedules, we will exclude TOR schedules, and then the specific OAT schedules that are receiving a special hedge compensation per the EDAM OAT. So if we go into a little more detail, so if you are at Craig, you get a CR at Craig, you are still going to receive congestion hedge on any schedule that has congestion impacts on the constraints which are currently modeled to the Craig scheduling point. Now, when I say Craig scheduling point, I'm referring to Craig as a scheduling point tie association. And that's all my slides.
So, James, can you maybe state again that the CRR flow calculation takes into not only the energy, like today, there is an imbalance there, which is the new product that we are introducing with. So with day-ahead market enhancements, one of the things that we did is we introduced the idea of imbalance reserve being co-optimized with energy, and that you can have congestion that prior to imbalance reserve was showing up on the energy component of the LMP, but will now be part of the imbalance reserve component of the LMP. So as part of that initiative, we have the design is that both imbalance reserve awards as well as energy awards, the congestion associated with those awards are going to be used to fund CRRs. With EDAM and the expansion to EDAM, we are now looking at not only ISO schedules, we are now looking at EDAM schedules. Now, for self-scheduling of energy, that means that ETC tours and the specific OAT schedules, we will only consider non-schedules associated. Let me rephrase that. We will not be considering ETC tours and OAT schedules of energy, because those are self-scheduled and they're using their rights. We will not be using those to consider the congestion revenue based upon their impact on ISO constraints. However, for imbalance reserve, we are going to look at all schedules across the EDAM footprint and their effectiveness on a constraint and the congestion revenue that comes at that constraint level. So the constraint X, if they say constraint X, it'll have an energy component that's not associated with ETC tours and the specific OATs, and it'll have an imbalance reserve component that is based on all imbalance reserve schedules.
Thanks, James. Looks like we have a few questions before we go to the raised hands. We received a question in the chat earlier from Wei Chi from 5 Dimensions Energy. First question is, after EDAM goes live in 2026, will those DGAPs be available for bidding in the CRR monthly auction, even though the CRR positions from the annual auction will not be changed for now?
So yeah, to answer that question, the answer is no. Because we are doing this transitional period for at least 2026, during the transitional period, you are only going to be allowed to bid on the scheduling points of the ISO balancing authority area. As we have that discussion, the future discussion on post-transitional period, that's when we'll address whether or not DGAPs what their role will be in both the CRR market and the energy market.
Great, thanks. And next hand in the queue is Seth Cochran. Go ahead, Seth. You might be double muted if you're speaking, Seth. Yeah, we're still not able to hear you, Seth, so if you can write your question in the chat, or we can also try circling back to you afterwards. Next, we have a question from Dan Williams.
The last question, I promise. So, James, can you quickly describe just when looking at transfer congestion, does imbalance reserves impact transfer congestion, or were you saying just it will impact the specific constraints but not transfer congestion? Or transfer revenue, sorry.
That's right. So transfer revenue is not being considered as part of funding CRRs. However, at each transfer location, and it could be energy imbalance or imbalance reserve, there is a congestion component that's directly tied to the ITC ISL. If there is any congestion associated that materializes because the ITC is binding, then that congestion is being used or being considered when paying out CRRs.
I may not have enunciated very well. That is a good confirmation. I was thinking specifically just about imbalance reserves. So when optimizing those, is there an interplay between imbalance reserves and transfer revenue, or only the local constraints within each BA?
So I was trying to be generic, but yeah. So when we solve the market, transfer revenue can be generated for energy and imbalance reserve in the ISM. In both those scenarios, there can be a congestion component related to the ITC.
Yeah. Oh.
Does that answer your... Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I think I answered Dan's question.
I think so. Dan,
I think you did as well. Thanks, James.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to read a question we received in the chat before going to our final raised hand. Callie Wells wrote, will the congestion revenue from the imbalance reserves go into the CRR balancing account or be included in the CRR 1B calculation when determining underfunding at a constraint level?
The answer is both. So we are considering it when we are determining the underfunding. Anything that is, if we have, let's say I have an imbalance reserve that doesn't have any CRRs on it, that is going to go to the balancing account. So yes, it goes to both. But I think the key part of that question you want answered is, will imbalance reserve be used to determine the funding of the CRRs? And the answer is yes.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read one more chat question before going to some other raised hands. We received a follow-up question from Wei Chi from 5 Dimensions Energy, asking, once EDAM goes live in 2026, will there be any new congestion introduced into the CRR market that could impact it?
No, not with EDAM going live. The new congestion is the day-ahead market introduction of imbalance reserve. That's it.
Great.
Not the CRR.
Great, thank you. Next in the queue, we have Daniel Cretu. Go ahead, Daniel. Looks like that hand was lowered. You can go ahead and raise it if you do think of a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I want to follow up on what Khaled just said as well. So if you're thinking that there might be a new congestion product in the CRR market, no. The CRR that you market, the CRR you purchase in the market is to cover both your energy and imbalance reserve exposure.
Yeah.
That's why both are being used to fund the CRR.
Thanks, James. Next in the queue, we have Glenn. Go ahead, Glenn. You might be... Oh, there, we can hear you. And please state your name and affiliation.
My name's Glenn, Dynasty Power. On slide 15, you mentioned there'll be no intertie scheduling at Mona Crayview. Will these intertie schedules be moving somewhere else? Like, are they moving to a gap tie, or where are they going?
So I think we've talked about it a little bit earlier. It can be a couple. It could be from internal generation within PACE area that's going to load, or vice versa. Or you can go to the boundary of PAC East and have an import, and that import could be supporting what you do today. As it flows to the transfers between the two balancing authority areas, we are going to determine what the congestion exposure is on those transfers. That congestion exposure is what is going to be used to help fund CRRs.
Okay, so if I buy Mona CRRs in this annual auction, the SP tie price that I'll be exposed to with a physical schedule export out of CAISO to Mona would still be that Mona SP tie price?
If Mona has converted all the way to an internal EDAM intertie location, you will not be able to do economic bidding or self-scheduling on Mona as an import-export. You can do it as a transfer, TSR type 1, where you're using your rights to show that it's going in and out of PAC East. And that you're going to get congestion hedge for.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Next in the queue, looks like we have a final hand raised by Daniel Cretu. Go ahead, Daniel.
Can you hear me? This is Daniel Cretu, Department of Water Resources. If you go back to slide 15, I think I asked this question, but I was not completely sure that you said to wait for these slides.
Correct.
Right now, in the sources of CRRs, they're listed Craigview and Mona. Can we request CRRs source these two sources before April 2026 and April to 2026? Because I would think May 2026 is when the EDAM is going to be implemented. Can we request?
Yeah, so Daniel, for the calendar year or CRR year of 2026,
yes,
you can request. Yeah, you can request or you can bid for CRRs at Craigview 1 GN001, as well as Mona 3 N5101. Those are valid CRR scheduling points. They will remain valid CRR scheduling points throughout the CRR year of 2026.
And that would have been true for the annual 2026, which it's already done?
Yes.
Okay. Second question. Considering we get in any month those CRRs from Craigview to our source, the supplements from Craigview to the ISO side cascade, let's say, whatever is that, will be done just notional value without the track 1B, and from the ISO SP point to inside the ISO will be notional value plus the track 1B for both day ahead and imbalance reserve settlement, MCCs.
For funding of those CRRs, yes, it'll consider all schedules it'll consider all schedules going from Craig, you said Craig to, sorry.
Our seats inside also, at most.
Yeah. All right, you would get all the schedules that have impacts on the same constraints as your Craig CRR. You will have the ability to get CR funding as long as those schedules, energy is not associated with a TOR, ETC, or note, but all imbalance reserves will go to fund that.
But you said track 1B doesn't apply to both day ahead MCC and our imbalance reserve MCC past the ISO boundary. Will be just.
Yeah, so as part of the congestion revenue allocation, we identified that as there is a CR impact related to that initiative where there are EDAM constraints. These are EDAM constraints that are going to impact all schedules, both in the ISO BA and the EDAM BAA. Those EDAM constraints are not going to be used to pay CR holders. We are isolating it because you are currently purchasing the CRRs to address ISO exposure, BA constraint exposure. So right now it's being isolated to ISO constraints only.
But the notional value goes beyond to Craigslist.
Yes.
To Craig. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it would be great if you guys can provide some numerical examples for those things. It would be great.
For numerical examples, I would refer back to our congestion revenue allocation initiative. We have put numerical examples in there.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And taking a final look here, I'm not seeing any other questions in the queue. So I think next we'll move to hear from John Anders regarding tariff clarifications.
Thanks, Christina. John Anders, legal. We had posted a set of tariff clarifications on, I think it was November 4, same time frame as the technical paper that's been the subject of all the discussions we've had since then. But on that schedule, we were looking forward to comments from stakeholders on November 18, so that's next week. And we continue to look forward to those comments. There were quite a few clarifications in that tariff language posted, draft tariff language posting that, are not affected in any way by what we've been talking about throughout the day-to-day and the workshops last week. So any comments you might have on that. We will also be taking any comments you may have and factoring in what we've heard from everyone last week, this week, and working with SMEs to begin to develop additional tariff changes to support this transitional approach that's been the subject of discussion today. And we'll do our best to have some information about that on our call December 3rd. We don't know how far along we'll be at that point, but I think we do have a pretty solid goal of publishing updated draft tariff language reflecting your comments on what was posted November 4th, as well as the transitional approach prior to the December WEM governing body and board meeting, which is the 16th to the 18th. So, those are our goals, and I'll just say what we've been talking about is mostly focused in the area of the proposed clarifications we had published for Appendix C, Section A8, and also the resource adequacy appendix that was attached to that. We're going to be working through that, but if you just think conceptually, the rest of the changes are clarifications and unrelated to this technical workshops and conversations today. So really appreciate any comments you have. We're going to continue that process on forward. We're going to wrap this effort into that, so there's a pathway to get it all done in support of EDAM go live for May 1. Thanks.
Yeah. Just maybe to add, I don't know if there's any question.
I'm not seeing any questions in the queue at this moment.
We're going to do next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want 1 minute, just to thank, thank the whole team. Actually, I would like to thank all of our market participants and our, the comments and the questions and the clarification that we received helped us actually focus on what really matters for the go live of the EDAM and have more time to work out more details around the final. I would like also to mention that the paper that we posted before about the EDAM intertie scheduling, probably we will need to re-version that one because we don't want it to look like this is what we are doing for go live day one. We probably need to have maybe a shorter one that will describe the day one, but we will probably rebrand that paper to have it like more of the subject to the discussion, or maybe a starting point for our future, what would be the future solution or the final solution. So the way that it is titled right now could be misunderstood that this is what the day one look like, which we would like to avoid that confusion. Go ahead.
Okay. And so with that, we'll hear from Joanne Serena on some next steps.
Go ahead.
All right, yeah, good. Thanks, Khaled. Thanks for that clarification on the technical paper. So we'll make sure stakeholders are aware of when those papers are updated and available. I also wanted to mention that the market sim is underway. So some of these things that we talked about, you can actually see getting demonstrated in the market sim. So I know we had a question from Dan and others earlier about being able to sort of see the scheduling outcomes in Fiber, CMRI, and Oasis. And so market sim is a good place to really get some examples of that. But we'll work on comments that are coming in. We'll continue to work on examples and provide clarity. So in terms of the comment period, we do have a comment window open right now. We will keep that comment window open until December 5th so that we can get your comments on what you've heard today, and then we'll determine next steps from that feedback, so we can sort of figure out how we're going to evolve in terms of a transition period and how long that transition period will last. So your comments are important. If you can get those in, we've got it open until December 5th, and then we'll go from there. So any final comments from the team here? Otherwise, no. Thank you all for sitting through with this with us. Thanks to the ISO team for coming together with some a good path forward. It seems like it seems overall a positive outcome, and we'll continue to work with stakeholders on the details. So thanks everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. And as a reminder, this meeting was recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. All meeting materials and the video recording will be posted soon. And Joanne has a final thought.
Is it the next slide?
Oh, yes, we can go to the next slide.
So one other thing I just want to mention is we have been creating a FAQ document. We have been taking in all the questions that came in from the August workshop, city tickets, comments, regular inquiries from stakeholders and customers, and we have developed this FAQ document. It doesn't cover the intertie scheduling pieces that we've been talking about, but it does cover a lot of other questions related to the EDAM implementation. Hopefully you find this tool helpful. We will continue to update this tool as more questions come in and we're able to provide answers. So look for this. We've got it posted in multiple locations across the ISO website. If you've got any questions about it, you can always let us know if you have problems accessing it. All right? Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, that concludes our conference. You may now disconnect.